Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Brand Innovators Livecast series. My name is Lauren Kania, and I am our Vice President of Client Success here at Brand Innovators. It's been a long time since I joined you guys on stage, so I'm really glad to be back here and honored to be opening the program for our friends at Veracast, who've put together such an awesome agenda for you today. We're going to be hearing, in addition to some senior leaders from Veracast, we're going to be hearing from folks from Mondelez, Pepsi, Kellogg's, Molson Coors, and Constellation Brands. So before we get started, I wanted to remind you of a few things. We do have a Q&A widget on your screen here, so you're welcome to submit questions throughout the entire afternoon of programming. So at the end of each session, our moderators will take a few minutes to answer or to ask some of the questions of each of the marketers. So please send in some questions and hopefully we'll be able to get to them. This is being broadcasted live. So if there's somebody that wasn't able to make it previously, if they have a conflict, that's totally fine. You can forward this YouTube link to them and they can watch on demand or live if they're able to. So without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce you to your master of ceremonies today, our lovely MC. Our guest MC will be Maggie Giancola. Maggie is the head of CPG and NCH sales and strategy at Veracast.
Amazing. Thank you, Lauren, for that incredible introduction. And hello, everyone. I am thrilled to be with you today. Very excited to be a part of this conversation. I'm going to just quickly make sure that the screen share is coming up appropriately, so bear with me 1 second. All right, perfect. Welcome, everybody. As Lauren mentioned, and I love the Master of Ceremonies title, so Lauren, thank you for that. I am Maggie Giancola, head of CPG and NCH sales and strategy at Veracast, and I am physically based in Columbus, Ohio, and a proud member of our awesome CPG industry for over the past 15 years. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Brand Innovators for what is an incredible partnership that has allowed us to make today's event possible. We couldn't be more thrilled to be hosting the next few hours to bring thoughtful and collaborative discussion around the future of CPG marketing. And with that, we have some very incredible leaders from both Veracast as well as all throughout the industry, as Lauren mentioned, and we are truly excited. When we think about this time last year, we were emerging into a hopeful place in terms of the pandemic. Vaccines were starting to roll out, testing was becoming more readily available, and there was a lot of conversation that spurred from that around this concept of recovery or returning back to normal. As we flash forward and sit here today, what we know now is it's not about returning back to pre-pandemic life. It's not about, quote unquote, recovering. The world has changed. We as humans have changed and evolved in light of all of those worldly changes. And it's about accepting the fact that change is the new normal. And in that creates a new baseline for us all. The world we are living today is the new baseline in terms of how we look towards the future, both as we think about it from a human perspective and then also from a marketing and a commerce perspective. So how do we go about accepting this is the new normal, this is the new baseline, and then using that as a springboard to where we go from here? That's where we really need to have a conversation in regards to where the future of CPG marketing is headed. And it's our perspective that it really hinges and starts with truly understanding who a consumer, who a human is today in light of all the changes that we've all experienced over the last few years. By taking that in-depth pause to understand where consumers' heads, hearts, and priorities are at is going to be the springboard to how we navigate the future, specifically within CPG marketing, because that is going to ultimately serve as the goal to create more meaningful connections with those consumers and motivate them to ultimately drive commerce. So who are we today? With that, first and foremost, we are people first. We are all humans first. It's been an unbelievably tough past 20 months. And so to be able to pause and recognize that we are all humans first, we are all people first, is critically important, not only for us as humans and humanity in general, but also for marketers. We all understand that through the last 20 months, we've changed as humans. Our priorities have changed. For some people, it might be activism based on all the social issues that have come forward. For others, it might be a pivot towards an in-depth focus on self-care due to the fears that the pandemic spurred inside of many people. A lot of people have felt lost. So the ability to understand that we are all humans first is vitally important, not only for humanity, but as marketers, because consumers want to be seen versus marketed to. They want and crave those deep, meaningful connections with everything they interact with, including brands and retailers for that matter. Secondarily, as hopefulness has emerged, at the end of the day, people are still having a hard time. The systemic impacts of the pandemic are real. Most recently, we are at an all-time high in the last 13 years of inflation. Prices have increased. And what that means from a CPG perspective is the ability to buy the brands and the categories that consumers are loyal to becomes more challenging potentially. And inside of that, there becomes this mixed bag of emotions. I do have optimism because things like vaccines, testing, et cetera, are more readily available, but I'm also really frustrated that my financial situation hasn't changed greatly. And on top of it now, in order to buy the brands and products I love, I have to pay even more for it. And that doesn't work for me in my current financial state. It's a mixed bag of emotions that weighs heavily on a person's psyche, which does impact their ability to follow that path to purchase in a more fluid manner. All of it together is just, again, the human side of it, the reality of what people are facing and the ability for us as marketers to understand that so we can truly connect with them, find empathy for them, and engage with them with that understanding and knowledge. In addition to that, what used to be quarantine trends 2 years ago, some of which have become established behaviors, namely the fact that people are home more. And with that, from a CPG perspective, they've entered into new categories. They've become established buyers in different categories. And also, given those financial impacts, they might be really open to switching around. So with that becomes an opportunity to think about both a threat, depending on where you sit within the category, or an opportunity to gain new loyal consumers if people are more open-minded to switching in light of the fact that they are in new categories. And then second to last, they want great experiences. But what's fascinating, a year ago, we were all talking about, is it digital? Is it in store? They want both. They want the ability to have a diversified experience based on their particular wants and needs, but they want it to be a great, customized, personalized experience. If you look at the middle here, you'll see that people actually are returning in store to do their food shopping at a higher rate than pre-pandemic. It stems from key things like the growth of e-commerce last year, causing really long delivery times, substitutions in brands that were out of stock, maybe not the best personalized experience in that e-commerce platform. They wanted to go back in store, but they do want to be able to buy brands like health and beauty online. It's diversified. The net of it is It's not going to be all in store. It's not going to be all online. It's going to be diversified. But the bottom line is consumers want a great experience and a personalized experience. And then lastly, value is key, but value in all its forms. Yes, it's about promotions and cents off because of the financial impacts. That is still very true, but it's also about what a brand or a company stands for. What is the value that I'm buying into when I buy this brand, and being able to bring that forward in our messaging so that consumers feel like they're a part of something that is truly leaning into their key priorities and values, many of which were heightened over the course of the last 20 months. So we know they're having a hard time financially and emotionally, and they appreciate value in all its forms. We know quarantine trends have become behaviors, and with that becomes new category buyers and new opportunities to bring people into your brand set. They are craving to be seen and valued as a human, not just as a consumer. And they want that reflected in their experiences, particularly when we think about the intersection of brand and retail. I am thrilled to have a number of industry experts and moderators with us today to dive into how we can action what we now know about the consumer's mindset to serve as a springboard to how we all think about the future of CPG marketing. So with that, let's jump into our first session of the day. Bear with me while I toggle screens here to introduce our first two presenters alongside of our first moderator. So we have two amazing executives from Mondelez International, brand marketers working with Milk's favorite cookie, Marion Campbell, and Lauren Flanagan, senior brand manager with Oreo Mondelez International. And steering our panel discussion will be Amy Knoll, our director here at CPG in Veracast. And ladies, I will pass it off to you, and thank you for joining us today to engage in this incredible dialogue.
Thanks so much, Maggie. I'll let everybody get situated. Their screens. Ooh, I like the Oreos. And I feel like this lends itself to kicking us off with, before we get started into the big topics, ladies, what's your favorite flavor of Oreo?
I'll let Lauren go first, and she owns the brand.
I'll go for it. First of all, thank you guys for having us. Super excited to be here today, and definitely had to tempt you guys with some Oreo visuals right here at lunchtime. So really excited to be here and chat Oreo. For me, I am less keen on it doesn't have to be like a particular flavor of Oreo, but I'm a big cream person, so it always has to be double stuffed. That's my only requirement.
Love it.
And hi guys, yes, thanks for having us. Echoing Lauren on the double stuff too, but also golden Oreo is my favorite. So I'm a rare breed, but I'm holding strong.
I'm with you there. I like the golden Oreos too. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. As Maggie touched on, we know that it's more important than ever for brands to stay relevant, especially within this given changing buyer landscape. Lauren, how is Oreo evolving its creative to really deliver strong equity messaging that still feels really customized?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I would actually start by saying that in order to really drive relevance, it kind of has to be looked at in two ways. And some of it, of course, is embedded within the creative, but really to really be relevant, it's kind of an approach that requires thinking beyond just the creative as well to really be effective and authentic. So I would say that being relevant really starts first with actually being relevant broadly. So thinking about being relevant in culture, and then also secondarily being relevant to the individual. So that really is more about, being a brand that has some meaning and is really connecting and adding value in the lives of the individual consumer. And then thinking about that specific piece of driving relevance, it's really a 360 approach. So it's beyond just the creative. It has to be showing up in everything that the brand does. So everything from product innovation to living the brand values through purpose work to reflecting those values in paid campaigns. And for Oreo in particular, having a brand voice that really stands for something and taps into cultural passions for people kind of throughout their different passion points really gives us a platform to be relevant. So ensuring that we show up in the same way in our creative from a comm standpoint is definitely really critical. And digital, of course, is a really great tool for that. So I think in particular, digital really unlocks the ability to get more customized, deliver more one-to-one messaging. And for Oreo, we really do strive to get to that one-to-one place. And we are still progressing. It's still something we're continuing to build our capability in. But I'd say in general, our approach is actually to start first and foremost with the platform. So really needing to be platform specific creative. There's no more, matching luggage. There's no more one concept, reformat it for different platforms. It's really that you need to think about kind of the mindset of the consumer when they're coming to different platforms. So, I know myself, like I'm not going to Twitter for the same thing I'm going to TikTok for. I'm not going to Instagram for the same thing I'm going to YouTube for. And so it's accounting for that as you think about the concepts to launch on each of those platforms. So it's really customization actually starts first with the platform and the mindset the consumer is in, and then layering in the approach of getting to that more one-to-one messaging based on what those behaviors of that specific individual are, what their passion points may be. And for Oreo in particular, we use an approach called empathy at scale. And Marian would love for you to just kind of like jump in and cover a little bit more about what that is and some of the tactics we've used this year to really get into empathy at scale.
Yeah, and for those of you on the line that have worked with Mondelez, I don't think the term empathy at scale is new to you. And I know a lot of marketers are striving for that as their North Star. So just to break it down from a Mondelez perspective, one, being a snacking brand it's actually hard to personalize your messages when you reach such a broad audience and there's so many potential opportunities to utilize versus, very specific need states that some products drive. So for us and for Oreo, especially having such a high household penetration and, consumers across all age groups, we really have to Lauren's point, lean on our platforms to drive some of those insights, but also just show up in a relevant way there. And then we're achieving the rest just through Oreo's, naturally driven equity. So empathy at scale for Mondelez can mean a lot of different things based on the varying products we have. But it is truly taking, from the start of the creative concept to make sure that we're not just, creating one mass message that then gets cut down and, distributed everywhere. And more so thinking about where it's showing up, but also the consumer, their affinities, what's our way in, and finding multiple versions of that so that we can be more, personalized in how we show up. And we believe that the more personalized the message, the more universal it actually becomes. So just because you're talking to one subset of people doesn't mean that, it's not going to resonate with others because they see the connection, and it actually builds that empathy with the brand as well. And then just to give you some examples of how this worked for Oreo this year, we worked across all our JBP partners to really understand why people are going to the platform for our particular, equity messaging. How do we tie in, the stay playful and kind of coming back from COVID and lockdown and using Oreo's, platform to help connect with the consumer in ways they maybe just naturally want to be, having fun online, creating those connection points. So Twitter is an example of us driving empathy at scale, where we created a customized Oreo scopes, right? So you asked us at the beginning what our favorite Oreo is. That's a very natural question when it comes to the brand. We married it with, a natural way to go to Twitter is to check your horoscope and to share something about yourself or find something out about yourself. So we created, based on how someone tweets and what they do on the platform, what Oreo do they match with? And is that really what they like from a taste perspective? So it's just a fun way to connect and do it within the platform's, strengths, not just our own.
That's great. And I'm going to jump in real quick. There's, for those of you listening, there is a Q&A function. So please feel free to use the chat function and we can answer questions at the end. Forgot to include that in the beginning. Back to empathy at scale. I think that makes a whole lot of sense, Marian. This seems to lead, though, being so customized by platform and personalized. It's a big ask of the creative agencies that you work with. Tell us a little bit more about that process and how that works.
Yeah, I can jump in a little bit here, and Marian, feel free to add as well. Yep. But I think, you're right, Amy, like it definitely is something that is a little bit of a challenge if you think about it from the creative standpoint. Like being more personalized kind of inherently means that you need more messaging, and that always means more time. It means more cost. It means a bigger ask from the creative agencies as well, just to get that sheer volume of assets created and out into the market. I actually think it's a place that continues to be ripe for a lot of innovation in terms of thinking about how to get more of those production efficiencies into models where you really need a bigger volume of assets than we have traditionally in the past. So I think, for us, it's something we're still exploring every day and learning about and figuring out. I would say there's a couple of things that we've done so far. I would say, first and foremost, we have a great partner in the Martin Agency, our creative agency, and they're, constantly exploring this with us as well. So it's everything from thinking about how we can create assets that are really kind of product forward. So think about, really gorgeous visual of a cookie and a milk that can really serve as like baseline creative assets that really become agile and can be manipulated throughout the year to be dynamic. So kind of thinking about being smart about the type of assets we're creating so that there is that flexibility. And then I would say the other piece that we've tried in the past is also leveraging some of the platform capabilities. So you think about like a director mix or Google DCO and having those auto-optimized kind of intelligent platforms. We've definitely leveraged those in the past as well. But I would say there's still, more runway in terms of figuring out the best way to do it. But absolutely, the bottom line is it definitely does necessitate more assets, which ultimately is more work, more time, more cost. But it's something we're learning and looking for more innovation in every day.
Yeah, and to give the media perspective and just to build some context. So this is my first time on the brand side of the business in a media role, and I really do empathize with Lauren, empathize being the buzzword of the day, on, the quality control of our assets. And, especially as a food brand, we have to show up with taste appeal. So there's certain things we can't sacrifice just to be able to scale, right? So there are still hard decisions that have to be made on, where do we balance the quality of the asset with the volume? And that's still something I think everyone in our shoes is trying to figure out, and our partners are helping us do that, right, by offering, their capabilities to us to scale as best as we can with our agenda in mind. Because we recognize, and I'll talk a little bit about the process of how we're trying to move that direction. Like, we recognize this digital first agenda is, one, it's not new, but for CPG organizations, like, there is some overhauling to do in the ways of working. And we understand what that's requiring of our agencies and of our partners. So this year, especially Oreo, we doubled down on like making this our priority and really being able to look back on the year and say we did it, at least in spots, and we did it well. So we tested really new ways of working because we have the talent to do it. It's really just setting up the right checkpoints and places of success to maximize our agency skill sets within the process. So it starts all the way from, our INA team working more closely with our media team and creative team to make sure that the creative idea has enough legs to live this way. So it takes less time, to iterate and come up with concepts, so that everything has a digital first way of thinking versus older TVC to digital thinking that used to be our ways of working. And then it moves into, how do we work with our creative teams to bring the JBP partners in sooner? Because as I mentioned before, right, a lot of the insights or reasons we want in with our consumer is driven by how they come to the platforms. So them having that seat at the table. And then we even on Oreo, create an asset mix to really make choiceful decisions on which ones are we going to prioritize the more bespoke approach and which ones are we going to, to scale back a bit. And we work very closely now with our production AOR, our creative team, and media teams. It sounds like a no-brainer, but it is a lot of different ways of working. And I think if, our JBP partners would attest, we have areas to improve on, but we're really happy to see, that the overall comm strategy can come to life when you work this way, so that the whole is kind of greater than the sum of all its parts. So
that's great. And I feel like as we're talking about, it's twofold when you customize per platform that you're on. You have the creative element that needs to be customized and personalized, but there's also the social element. You want to ensure that you're speaking to the consumer in the type of environment and that you have the same look and feel that platform that really resonates with the consumer on that platform. How has Oreos used this as an opportunity to address any social issues that have been able to grow and bring forth more awareness in this last year?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And I think it's actually the kind of conversations that are happening on social and the behavior that is related to that is, I actually think, the biggest way that digital has changed the future of marketing. Obviously, there's, the enhanced kind of capabilities from a pay perspective, but it's really just the behavioral change and the expectations that come along with that from a consumer standpoint. We're living in an age where a tweet can and actually has started movements, right? From a social movement perspective, it really has started socially in that sort of environment. I think the other piece of that is because there is that ability to interact, to engage with these sort of movements, there's just more expectation that that does happen. And I think in particular, if we're thinking about Gen Z, this is, an incredibly passionate generation who really has that expectation that all people are stakeholders in positive societal change, and that includes brands. So I think it presents a really interesting opportunity and a challenge for brands to think about how or if, we engage in those conversations. And social and kind of digital spaces really provide that opportunity. So it's one, because the platforms are lending themselves to longer form content, right? Like you can, instead of just the 30-second spot on TV, you have the ability to have content that spans for, several minutes and can really tell a story. You also have the ability to have more two-way conversation in this environment, right? Like it's not just a brand putting out a piece of media, but it's actually, a conversation that can happen between brand and consumer. So when it comes to those values, it's important, for brands to take a stand. Whereas before, we wouldn't see that as a traditional piece of business, but now it is, in a way, a part of business is to have that brand voice and those values and to really be able to communicate in a way that feels authentic and is contributing to some of those positive changes that we're really seeing that there's kind of the expectation to be a part of. And I think, that's really coming to life in a lot of different ways from different brands. I think you can look at like a Ben & Jerry's, who really uses their organic social presence to really communicate a lot of their kind of stance and values from a social justice standpoint. Or Oreo specifically, we've used our social channels for longer form videos like Proud Parents, which was a really great example of us really providing a medium for storytelling that messages a lot of our brand values of inclusivity and our support and allyship for the LGBTQ plus community. So I would say, in general, it's definitely a great opportunity for brands to be a part of the conversation and to really connect with consumers and also to be a part of change. Like there's a unique platform and a unique set of resources that brands have that can really contribute in positive ways to a lot of the conversations that are happening now. So there is that opportunity to be a part of it, but it also needs to definitely be something that's considered really carefully. So it's important for it to be authentic. It's important for it to align with not just the values of the brand, but also the actions of the broader organization. So it goes beyond just what Oreo can say, but how are we showing up with our employees? How does diversity look within the people that are working on the brand? How does it look internally, and do those values match across all the ways we're showing up? So yeah, I think definitely the digital social space is definitely a place where a lot of social issues are going to continue to be a part of the conversation. I think it will be a huge role of these social platforms going forward to continue to push those initiatives and agendas, and brands have to really be thoughtful about the best places they can authentically show up and really, being a part, not just opportunistically, but being a part in a way that's really going to actually help for some good as well.
Are there specific platforms that you think resonate the most from these type of messages?
For sure. I definitely think it depends on what the conversation is. But I'd say, again, just, thinking about the point that we were making earlier about platforms having different behaviors and people coming to different platforms with different mindsets. I definitely think Twitter is a place where, you see a lot of those conversations happening organically. Like it's really, people are going there for news and to participate in these conversations, whether it's political or some particular interest or social justice initiative. So I think organically, there's a lot of conversation that's happening there. And as a brand, we've seen a lot of success in launching some of those conversations on platform as well, whether it be the video, like I mentioned earlier, the Proud Parents execution a bit ago, or even just participating in some of those conversations via comment or via post. So I would say that each platform kind of has its role, but I would say in general, some of that behavior is just organically happening on Twitter, and there seems to be more receptiveness and engagement there.
Yeah, and balancing, when we do it from just an organic owned perspective versus paid, quite frankly, of, how are we going to produce and run media around this? But especially to Lauren's point, people have different laid back mentalities when they're going to some platforms versus they want and expect to hear brands' voices on others. So we really do balance that from the organic strategy we employ, and then from a paid perspective, it usually follows the same. But we want to still have the scale and make sure we stand behind our message, and that it's a larger part of our equity comms strategy for the year. So it's showing up everywhere in different ways.
Right. And I would just build on that a little bit as well, because I think it's a great point that there's a place for it that really thrives in an organic space, but it really is something that does have to be lived across everything. So it is, are we reflecting those same values when we communicate something from a paid perspective? Are we representing people in the way that we're, hoping to do as a brand value? And it's also even in the partnerships that we do, like a Lady Gaga Oreo, like that was, there was a lot of thought and choice that went into a partnership like that, and choosing someone who represents and embodies a lot of the values that we have in a brand. So I totally agree with Marian in the sense that it's really something that has to come to life across the full spectrum.
So speaking about the Gaga partnership, we're talking a lot about how Oreo is increasing its equity really at the top of the purchase funnel. Tell me some ways that you guys are using the shopping experience to stay relevant.
Yeah, great question. And honestly, probably the most pressing as we move into, the COVID trends that Maggie talked about, as we entered into this part of the call. We're fortunate enough, right, where we've played a lot at the top of the funnel because we are really leaning on just brand love, brand equity, with what Lauren and I manage. But as those lines get much more blurred, and the KPIs we set are different than just that, brand perception and brand lift, we have to really take advantage of the tools that are there from a media platform, closed loop sales perspective, if you will. So we're looking at, a couple different ways. I mean, one, let's just start kind of from what Lauren mentioned, from the Lady Gaga Oreo integration and collaboration. We also had, Pokemon happen this year. And the reason I bring those up is just one, staying relevant, from all the way from packaging to in aisle to online to our media campaigns, is really important to Oreo, right? We're not just testing new flavors. We're actually bringing that relevancy you're able to do through media into, the shopping experience. So we take that, very seriously all the way down to the product and packaging level, and tying it to consumer interest, as well as, areas we know we have a right to play in. I also think, driving value back to the consumer is always kind of the first point of, is this worth a transaction, and how can Oreo show up? So, we also have launched our D2C capabilities about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And those are really special to us because we're actually finding a different way to transact and give value back to our consumers within our D2C site, versus it just being an extension of how they can shop online through, our retailers, social or in-store, right? We're specifically creating personalized custom Oreos in the way they can interact and purchase the product. And we believe finding those niche places, when we're finding the new ways to close loop and to purchase, is really important. And as we think about expanding that out, into like social commerce or, just transacting within, our standard media, that's definitely something we are looking to push into next year, and really understand, how much can we drive there? Where have the behaviors shifted enough that we have a right to play in a lower price point everyday product? And we're kind of excited to test and learn there.
That's great. Tell me a little bit more about the D2C offering that Oreos has. It's super unique, and it's also it makes so much sense. It doesn't feel forced, which is why I feel like this is so kind of ahead of the game from a CPG standpoint.
Yeah. So, and Lauren, feel free to elaborate and add on. So it's our Oreo ID product. So, it lives within Oreo ID website where you're able to go and customize your Oreo to gifting reasons, for personalized reasons, for really a bespoke way to engage with the brand. And it was already a behavior that people wanted to do, and we needed to make a capability around. So it was a natural fit for us to be able to launch in the D2C space with Oreo in particular. There are a few other Mondelez brands that have that same relationship with the consumer, and we can continue to find spots. But this one was something that was naturally being done. And we've been able to, really leverage it, and in fact, like sell out quite frankly on the capability. So we're excited on where that's going to scale. We've also leveraged the D2C site now for expanded reasons, like the limited time offers we're talking about. So when there is, a limited time offer with the Pokemon Oreo, we'll create an experience on the D2C site because we know it's bringing fandom and a reason to visit and engage. Versus our base sales and everyday, family and everyday packs. Lauren, I don't know if you want to elaborate anything more on the Oreo ID process.
Yeah, I would add a few things. I mean, I love Oreo ID for a lot of reasons. I think it does, so much from a brand and a consumer standpoint. I think, first of all, just thinking about the brand, it really does a great job of extending kind of that ubiquity of the brand and really extending the meaningfulness. And I think, Oreo is a brand that people have so much connection with from, childhood into adulthood and beyond. And it's really extending the meaningfulness into different occasions. So that's why gifting is, really important for the brand as we think about continuing to build that out. And Oreo ID is an amazing platform for that, and that you're able to customize messaging. You can send them, as gifts to people. So I love what it does from a brand ubiquity standpoint. It just really drives the meaningfulness of connection back to consumers. And I think from the consumer standpoint, it's very similar to what Mary was saying, just in the sense that this is a behavior that people have. Like, we opened this conversation with, what's your favorite Oreo? Everyone has, some way that they like to consume an Oreo, and Oreo ID gives you the ability to have some of that customization that really reflects, your own personal kind of preferences of what you love in the brand. So I think it does an amazing job of driving those kind of two sides of relevance, both in terms of being culturally relevant and then relevant to the individual. And it absolutely does give us an extension to continue to build out platforms, whether that be Lady Gaga or a Pokemon, really having those experiences that really feel that much more special, that much more custom. So having those kind of first release opportunities, or, having the ability to purchase them online, I think really does just further extend us in having that more direct relationship with consumers.
That's great. You touched on, everyone loves Oreos, right? It's just a matter of which Oreo is your favorite. This lends itself nicely to the Q&A portion. Somebody asked, if everyone loves an Oreo, how does the brand segment focus on audiences, whether it's family, Gen Z college students, guys who eat 10 Oreos in a sitting, etc.?
Yeah.
Do you want me to start, or you?
Go for it. You go for it.
Okay. Well, that is a great question. We find ourselves, revisiting that every time we look to launch, our equity messaging for the year. But first, we obviously have to have like a strong baseline of just who is purchasing our product, right? Who is our baseline consumer, from an audience standpoint. But then from there, we are a broad product, so we're able to find the swim lanes that work within our creative messaging. And that kind of goes back to the beginning of the conversation, where we're talking about, we have an insight on how do we build that stay playful, and what is that translating to this year. And that's when we work with our creative agencies to understand, okay, what is the way in now that we have that grounding together, we know our base audience and purchasers. So do we want to go through the lens of affinities, music, sports, art, or does the idea actually lend itself more to just very simple occasion-based, time of day, flavors? Like that's why it's like there are so many ways in when you talk about the concept of empathy at scale, and it really can translate in multiple ways. So every time we have a new creative concept, we come back to the table and understand which one of these and which avenue is the best to take to be rooted in the core concept.
Yeah, I would jump in a little. I think it's a great question, and it's a blessing and a curse, right? Like it's amazing to work on a brand that is so incredibly ubiquitous that, I mean, our penetration is really, really solid. Just in 1 year, we're at over, 55% of households. So at any given moment in the year, at least half of the people in this country have Oreos in their pantry. That's amazing. If you look at that from a 3-year perspective, that number is actually in the 70 plus percentile. So within the last 3 years, most people, the overwhelming majority in this country, have had an Oreo. And so, within that, you do have the opportunity to really think about what are the things that really people feel passionate about. It goes back to thinking about it from the 360 approach as well. So everything from our limited editions, those are meant to tap into those passion points of each unique different person, whether you're a Lady Gaga fan, a Pokemon fan, a Game of Thrones fan, having those passion points within the product. And then to Marion's point, what's the objective for the brand that year? Are we really looking to push into some of those new spaces with growing the penetration among those who might be lighter or lapsed? And if that's the goal for the brand, then, what does that look like? Who are those people? And how do we think about how we can speak to them specifically? So I think it's a balance, and it's really something that we look at from the total brand strategy and what are those objectives for the year, and who do we specifically want to speak to reach those objectives?
I think that makes a good point. And with Oreos being, you talk about the percentage of households that have Oreos in them, which is the penetration is crazy. What happens when Oreos aren't on the shelf? Have you guys had to deal with any of the challenges this year that most other CPGs have with regards to supply chain? And some of that backlash from COVID?
Yeah, for sure. I can speak to that. Yes, we're definitely no different than anyone else. I think it's hit literally every single industry that we have supply chain issues that really were spurred from the impacts of COVID. So we've definitely had to deal with that. And it really comes down to careful coordination with our sales team, our supply chain teams, and really managing that relationship with our customer partners as well from a retailer perspective. And so, it's a really dynamic approach that requires a lot of hands-on, but I would say in general, it's really a little bit of a mix approach. So if there's not this particular Oreo product available, how do we focus on the ones that are there, and continue to just kind of be available for consumers in the best way that we're able to show up?
That's great. We can go back to another live Q&A. Do you measure resonance and relevance? And do you track this as a KPI for your campaigns?
That's another great question. We do. So we have a lot of different ways to do that. And Marion, feel free to jump in from a media perspective as well. I would say from a brand equity perspective, there's definitely things that we have that are trackers. So every year we have kind of a refresh of how we're doing in terms of awareness, how we're doing in terms of brand love, in terms of meaningfulness. And there's like strategic approaches behind each of those levers and how we continue to drive that. So yes, it's definitely something we measure. We have a couple of different frameworks and research partners that help us with that, but it's definitely something that we track at least on a yearly basis. And then we also track within campaigns. And to the point of the earlier question of there being a lot of different types of people that are eating Oreo, we do also look to track within groups to ensure that, again, we're staying relevant in the broader sense, as in relevant in culture, but also we're relevant to individuals, and starting to think about that at a community level. Is there any particular group we're losing relevance with, or are we, broadly tracking in the right direction across all of those? So definitely something we measure at least yearly.
Yeah, and then the relationship of relevance to sales, when we think about ultimate KPIs, right? Like, is it driving brand growth, brand share, and sales of the brand? So we'll measure that all the way through, and especially where media is concerned, where are we driving the most impact to sales? We recognize, relevancy and engagement do link to sales. There are some deviations though, when you talk about just general brand equity and, product and value awareness, and then the purpose work that Lauren talks about of finding the right spaces to talk about stances and take a stand, and have that purpose-driven work. We're still trying to figure out the relationship that has to sales, but we know that matters less, honestly, in those instances. Like, to Lauren's point, it's what the brand stands for, and it ties back to our values. So we know it's crucial and important, just in our overall brand tone and voice. So even if that takes a back seat, we recognize, the importance of it holistically to our, our audiences.
That's great. And with the holidays right around the corner, I know that Oreos always has some special flavors that come out. How with digital marketing efforts will Oreo stand out from some of the other players in the digital space, knowing that it gets a little crowded around the holidays?
Yeah, so I'm actually super excited about the holiday campaign we have coming out this year. And stay tuned. You should see it relatively soon, within the next week or two. So excited to see some of the response there. I think from a digital social standpoint, again, it's going back to those like platform specific ways in. And so we've seen that what works really well for the brand on Instagram and Pinterest, for example, is different than some of the other platforms. So generally, we know that there's this incredible consumer behavior around recipe usage. For the brand in general, it actually happens throughout the year, but you can imagine that at the holidays, it's really a big baking season. People are always in the kitchen together making recipes, and it's a moment that Oreo is naturally a part of. And so what we've seen work so well for us with Instagram and Pinterest in particular is really having that recipe content that really focuses in on kind of what's happening organically in behavior. So you'll definitely see some of that coming to life. As well as really kind of focusing in on that. And then a broader campaign that I don't want to spoil for you, but just, a really fun way to think about how Oreo can show up and feel special in the season.
That's great. I'm excited to tune in for that, or tune online, wherever that will show up.
Yeah, and I'll just to tie back to another question and be transparent with the group, right? Like, because of the supply chain issues, like our ideals and ways of working for holiday like are a little different this year than years past. But we're really excited about what Lauren alluded to, like the platform we're launching. Like, we're launching a new creative platform, an idea that will carry us through the holiday season. So from a creative standpoint, we're really excited, and hopefully we'll see, the year over year growth of that, and being able to leverage all the platforms across for the holiday.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have time for one last Q&A. What are some unique digital transformations the pandemic accelerate for the brand? Or what are some unique digital transformations? Let's see. What unique digital transformations did the pandemic accelerate for the brand? There we go.
Okay. Digital transformations. Well, I guess.
Or other than, I know you guys spoke a lot to the D2C piece, and a lot of folks are going online more, and so you're having to customize digitally, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to help. Well, being a CPG brand, as I mentioned, from more of a lower cost point, barrier to entry, we're not usually a standalone product you buy just alone, right? But the behaviors and the on-demand aspect of online now has opened doors for us more than we expected, and or accelerated that behavior in like a 1 year time frame that we expected to be 3 years from now. So I think it just helps us prioritize some of the things we knew were coming, based on how other markets transact. So definitely the commerce piece and testing that and understanding it. I'll also just say, the prioritization internally of the importance of digital first thinking and behaviors moving from, how you access TV viewership. The word TV isn't the same anymore as it used to be. It's you're watching streaming, you're watching all these different ways of your downtime, which to us as historical marketers, we always wanted that grand stage, right? Of you sit down on a couch and you watch something long form, where we know that's changing. There's people at night that isn't how they even relax anymore. So finding those new spaces, I can't say we're fully there yet, but it has accelerated quite a bit. And I would say the Oreo team, we've really embraced, what does that mean? What does it mean for a holistic asset planning, back to Lauren's point, and where we show up?
All right. And full circle, bringing it back to empathy. We had a question about, are you guys currently activating any media around company purpose initiatives? I know you spoke company purpose or social initiatives. Is there anything live right now?
Yeah, so we do have a longstanding allyship with the LGBTQ community, as I mentioned earlier, and that's now gone on for over a decade. I think we're actually one of the first movers in that space to be brands that are vocal about, supporting causes and values. So we do have more to come. Again, don't want to spoil anything, but that relationship will continue. And there's ways that the brand is actively working on to continue that support and to actually grow that support and broaden the way that we're showing up. And there's some other things that we're looking to as well from a brand standpoint, other value or other extensions of the values that we have as a brand, and looking to support a couple of different initiatives as well. So it's something we are definitely evaluating ongoing and want to make sure we're doing from a really authentic space. And I definitely would say that allyship that we have, in particular with the LGBTQ community, is something we'll continue to build and expand over time, and something is in the works now.
That's fantastic. Any big surprising trends of this last year? I know that we all saw the e-commerce coming, right? And that we'd have to change. I don't think anybody anticipated having to change as quickly as we did. Any big digital trends that were surprising to you guys at Oreo this last year?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would say surprising, but I do think what's interesting, not even just this year, not even just with Oreo, but I would say in general, just watching how UGC is having a bigger role in the way that brands communicate, I think is really interesting. I think in a couple of different ways. I think actually thinking about the earlier question about what has, the pandemic sort of changed from the way that we think about digital. I would say production was one of the first things people had to rethink as people weren't flying to shoots. You have to think about, you can't hire talent at this moment. Like, how do you still communicate a message? And UGC is something a lot of brands turn to, including Oreo. And so I think that what's really interesting is I see that being something that endures over time, is continuing to leverage UGC in different ways, whether that be from a production standpoint or thinking about like an organic social strategy, continuing to leverage that as engaging content. So I would say that's something that Oreo definitely took more advantage of starting with the pandemic. And I think will continue to be important, especially with the rise of platforms like a TikTok, where you need to really show up with more of that kind of native to platform organic sort of, not as high production value quality sort of asset. So I'd say UGC is definitely something I'd see continuing to be a trend, and is something that we've taken part in, I would say even more since the start of the pandemic. Yeah, Marian.
Yeah, I think it honestly just tipped everything over that we were anticipating. I mean, I'll just list them quickly, like just screen time in general. It's unbelievably like, will we ever go back to less screen time like we had before, which we already thought was a lot, but it just tipped the scale. How you view, your video content online, or what you do to relax is much different now. I'd say expectations from brands are much higher, and that's accelerated through the pandemic and through a lot of the social causes that happened during the pandemic. I know that's not media driven, but it affects all of us. And then, of course, the commerce aspect and the on-demand nature now of grocery that never existed before outside of major cities. So there, it's all the things we thought. It's pretty crazy to see it happen in such a short amount of time.
Right. Well, it's clear that Oreo has really taken a front seat with regards to the digital innovation game, and I'm excited to see more to come in this coming year. And I'm very excited to see this new platform where we're hearing about around the holidays.
I couldn't agree more.
So much.
I'm on the edge of my seat with that teaser. Can't wait to see what comes.
Halloween's over. It's holiday now.
I know. Right? I'm ready. Put up the trees, the lights, cue the music. I'm with you. I'm with you, Marian. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for what was an amazing discussion. I particularly appreciated the commentary around the evolution and the messaging of Oreo to stay relevant, right? That's so squarely into what we're finding with the consumers want to stay more connected, particularly as we think about this empathy at scale. I just love that term and that concept in general. So thank you guys for such a great discussion. I also will say, from a personal perspective, number one, as a celiac, I greatly appreciate the diversification into gluten-free. Oreo, talk about a trend change for me, sample size of 1, now household staple on my shopping list every 2 weeks. So awesome. So publicly, thank you for that. And secondarily, as someone who's 7 months pregnant, your background really is crushing me right now. So I might have to go partake in my gluten-free Oreos. So thank you both so much. And Amy, thank you for great questions and great conversation.
Thanks for having us.
So much.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Awesome. We're going to move on to our next session. We're going to shift over to PepsiCo for this one. We have with us Corey Sexton, Marketing Director of Juice Plus Innovation, who will be taking the virtual stage alongside of Rachel O'Hara, who is a partner lead, Team CPG at Veracast. So we will get them up and running and very excited for this next conversation as well. Hi, Corey, are you there?
I'm here. Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you great. You look great. You sound great. I think we're just waiting on Rachel, and then we will jump right in.
Wonderful.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well.
We're thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for being a part of today.
Of course, of course. I'm actually out in California today, so we've got some team meetings. I'm huddled up in my hotel room and excited to chat with you guys.
That's awesome. I know a little bit of a time change. I was going to say good afternoon earlier, and I realized that we probably have everyone everywhere. Where are you based when you're not in California?
In Chicago.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So fellow Midwesterner, just like me. I'm in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, yes.
Very, very nice. Well, we are getting Rachel up and running. We're just having a quick technical difficulty, but I think she's about to join us now. So thank you everyone for bearing with us. And Corey, great to have a little personal chat.
Of course, Columbus, Ohio. I think that's the home of Jenny's ice cream. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right. That's one of my favorites.
Excellent reference. Also competitively, Grater's ice cream as well, also from Ohio.
Oh, wonderful.
I know. You can pick your poison of ice cream land over here. Well, it's great to meet you, Corey. Rachel, thrilled that you'll be hosting this session with Corey and looking forward to what I'm sure will be a very insightful chat. So I'll kick it over to both of you.
Thank you. Thanks, Maggie. Thanks, Corey. So good to see you again.
Yes, good to see you as well.
Yeah. I just wanted to say thank you for the invite. I'm really excited to sit down with you today. As you know, I'm very fortunate to sit on our CPG team and actually have worked with PepsiCo quite a bit across a variety of your different BUs. And as we sit down today and we think about the future of CPG marketing, my initial thought with having your perspective is who better to talk to than someone who sits in an innovation role. So really excited to learn from you today and think kind of broader scope across what you're doing to the Juice Plus business in the form of innovation and what we've learned from the past. So that's a little bit about me. Anything you want to add to your background before we kind of dive in here?
Yeah, sure. I'll just kind of quickly introduce myself to everyone in the audience. So I'm Corey Sexton. I've worked in CPG for probably just about 12, 13 years. Started my career in medical devices, worked a little bit in food service, was running a P&L at a very young age, learning, making mistakes, all those things that are always fun. Worked then at a few different CPG organizations. So I've worked at Tyson Foods on brands like Jimmy Dean and Tyson, and then various innovation roles as well. And then at PepsiCo, I've worked in a variety of functions as well. So I was actually hired to run the global functional agenda for Quaker, so did that for a little while. Ran the US innovation agenda for Quaker as well for a little bit, and then also did some pretty exciting work with the Aunt Jemima rebrand, so I led all that as well. And then also just recently took the role that I'm currently in, which is the marketing director for the juice business, specifically focused on innovation. So brands under my purview are brands like Tropicana, Naked, and Kavita as well, and also running our sustainability agenda for the business. So that's a little bit about me, and excited to chat with you today.
Just a couple of things you're focused on these days.
Just a few things, yeah.
Just a few things. So thank you for that. Let's dive in then. I know Maggie had mentioned earlier, like we've entered this idea of this new norm, right? And everyone I think is very excited to move on from the last 20 months and the impact that the pandemic has had.
That being said, though, we learned a lot, and the pandemic impacted CPGs in a variety of ways. So let's start there, and kind of a two-part question here. How did the pandemic affect the Juice Plus business? And then from there, what emerging consumer trends do you really see sticking moving forward?
Yeah, so if you had asked me that question 5 years ago, the juice category had always been challenged. It was one that, sugar was sort of a plague, and there's always kind of moving against consumer tailwinds. And I think, with COVID, there was been absolutely a resurgence in the adoption of juice, and consumers, I think, have sort of fallen in love with the category again. So there's basically been, that has been sort of the big kind of takeaway for our business, is there's just this resurgence of juice. It's, juice is sort of back. And I think that's driven by probably four trends that significantly impact our business. The first one is immunity, right? So we're in a global pandemic. People are masked. You're staying at home. You're not seeing your friends, and immunity is absolutely something that consumers were very much concerned with, and we actually see sticking into the future. So we've got data that says 78% of consumers are actually looking for more vitamin C in their diet, vitamins, minerals, those types of things. And so that really positions our brands, I think, in a space where we're pretty relevant right now, right? And so I'd say immunity is one of the big ones. The next one is sort of the shift in meal occasions. So I kind of mentioned this, but we're all kind of at home now, and we're sitting around the breakfast table again, and we're having pancakes, and we're having orange juice, and so the shift in the meal occasions is one that has been had a pretty big impact on our business. Prior to the pandemic, we saw a pretty big increase in snacking and sort of the proliferation of meals and occasions, whereas we've seen a shift back now to more traditional, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And so those are, that has a pretty big impact on a business that has, smoothies and orange juice and things like that. So I'd say that's the second one. The third one is, this idea of holistic health and wellness. And I think that has been one that we do see sticking into the future, where, it's not just about, functional benefits of products. It's how do they make me feel holistically, right? And so everything from mental health to physical health, we see the blending of those two spaces sort of moving into the future. And then the last one, which we've talked about kind of on this panel today, which is just the acceleration of commerce and what it means specifically for e-commerce. I think we as an industry are sort of playing catch up right now on, how we sort of catch up with the consumer adoption of e-commerce. And so, it's funny, in prior, I would say 5 years ago, if you ask innovation leaders across the industry, what their pipelines looked like, oftentimes it was, I had a dedicated pipeline for that channel, I had one for this channel, I had one for this channel. And we sort of don't have the luxury of that anymore. Consumers have the power of choice now. And that's one of the things that we've seen has been a pretty massive change, is we have to think that consumers have every touch point. And, e-commerce is one that is absolutely going to stick into the future. And so we have to think about that, not only with messaging and campaigns, but with product innovation as well. So I think those four were probably the ones that we actually see kind of sticking into the future that have a pretty big impact on our business.
That's awesome. And I can't help but think too about omni-channel, just the word omni-channel. And when I think of that, I think it takes on a lot of different meanings for different people, depending on their role and their day to day. But when I hear omni-channel, I think of kind of the role of media and into ensuring that we're hitting consumers right at multiple touch points, creating brand resonance across the board through a well-rounded marketing strategy. Talk about a little bit about what omni-channel means to you.
Yeah, I mean, so it's the holistic experience of consumers, I think, interact with your brand in an environment where there's not only, the media aspect of it, where we've got to hit them at the right moment with the right message at the right time, but also product innovation, right? And how we think about how our pipelines come to life at the moment of choice, right? So that to me is kind of how we think about it on innovation, which is you have to sort of think that consumers have the option to go on an Instacart and order your product with click and collect, but also get it delivered via Amazon Fresh, right? So and packaging sort of changes based on how those products actually ship from one point to the next. But we have to think about that first as we think about designing products, which is a bit of a shift in a mindset, to be honest, from where we were about 5 years ago, which, I would say some of the channels that we focused on that were emerging channels were sort of laggard and sort of, the pipeline. It was maybe an afterthought. Now it's absolutely kind of front and center. So yeah, it's media. It's at the right moment, at the right, right time with right message. But it's also product innovation as well, and how consumers actually transact.
That's great. Yeah, it's so much before. That's great perspective. It's so much before you get to that kind of final leg of being very close to conversion and speaking to consumers. The product has to be set up properly,
totally.
To be omni-channel. So that's great. Thank you for that perspective. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So what challenges did you face during COVID? And innovation is really, when you think about your role in external job, which I've learned from you this past week, not so much internal when it comes to research and the like, and how you're kind of basing your decisions. Can you talk a little bit about how that piece of your job, which is so critical and so important to informing product, how that's changed because of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's one of the things that we had to immediately shift. And I think if you ask any leader who focuses on innovation across any CPG, they're going to probably give you a similar answer, which is, you said it, innovation's an external job. It's part of our job to be in culture, to be, interacting with consumers, to really stay close to consumers and build that empathy muscle. Prior to the pandemic, we would be in homes with consumers. We would be shopping along with them in stores. And when you're in a global pandemic, those things have to change, right? And so we've actually had to shift some of our research methods to be over Zoom, to sort of get that virtual interaction. And I think that's actually one thing that's been a bit of a positive moving forward. I would argue we've sometimes been over reliant on data to make decisions, whereas, I think the CPG marketer of the future is going to have to really balance that art and science muscle. And I think the pandemic has sort of shifted our thinking there, where we have to now build that marketing muscle back. And it's one where, I think that equation is sort of getting back in balance to where we may not get all of the answers, but I think we're going to get probably 70% of the way there with the research methodologies that we have to date. And we feel pretty good about that. And that other 30% is where, the marketing gut's going to have to come in, which I think is great. I think it's better for us as marketers to be a bit more balanced with both art and science. And I think the pandemic sort of forced that for us. So yeah, we've shifted, ways of doing research with consumers. We've actually been able to get into market faster with products because of that. And we've been able to shorten our timeline. And then we've been able to build back that, like I mentioned, sort of that marketing muscle around art and science.
That's awesome. Yeah, helpful perspective too. And I think that lends itself well to kind of the idea of team building. And if we think about the future of CPG and purpose and needing that art in addition to, and I know PepsiCo is so heavily focused in data day in, day out, but not forgetting that piece of art and just understanding of the real world too, on top of that, that is just critical for innovation. So let me shift gears here a little bit too, like as we talk about the future of CPG, I know something that you're very passionate about is sustainability and purpose. So I'd love to hear how you're thinking about that and what that means to you.
Yeah, it's something that, we've talked a little bit about kind of the other panels as well, but I think that, moving forward, the future of CPG is going to have to focus here. And I think it's a shift from where we were, which was, it's the question of if we engage in this conversation, or is it the right time for us to be talking about this conversation as a brand? I think we need to recognize that we actually have an obligation, right? As stewards of the brands that we manage, we actually have an obligation to authentically engage in cultural topics that are meaningful to not only our business, but our consumers. And so that's a shift in how we think. And I think, a lot of the social issues that have happened most recently have I think positively forced us in the right direction to understand that brands do impact culture. And it's our role as, I think, stewards of the brands to really understand that piece of our job, but also know that it's an obligation that we have as the steward of the brand to really advance the conversation in the right direction. So I think that's a shift in mindset from where we were of, kind of a hesitancy on if we engage to more of it's an obligation. I think we have to engage. So and we look at that across our portfolio of brands. We have brands that have different purpose, different meaning, and different impact on culture. And it has to be authentic, right? It has to be a conversation where you can authentically engage, because I think consumers are smarter than that now.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what we have to recognize as marketers and leaders is it's got to be the right conversation. But once we kind of recognize why we exist, what our brand stands for, and the impact that we have on society, I think you can then authentically engage in the right type of topics. So
that's great. That's great. Super helpful. I have to ask you then, if we're talking about purpose, and I know activism came up earlier in the discussion today too. You mentioned you worked on the Aunt Jemima rebrand. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and just how that's too rooted in right purpose? And I know it was a huge initiative for PepsiCo, and we've helped support the Pearl Milling Company rollout as well. So would love your take on that.
Yep. Can you hear me still, Rachel? Sorry.
Oh, I can. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes. So, that was one, as I mentioned, where marketers have an obligation to understand the impact that brands have on culture. And I think that was one of the great things that we saw was it was our obligation to advance the brand in the right direction. So, it was never a question of if we were going to, rebrand Aunt Jemima. It was a question of how and what is the future. And that's where we spent a lot of time, a lot of effort. We engaged the right cultural competent partners. We had the right panel of diverse experts to help, build that muscle for us and help us, kind of be listeners more than drivers. And that to me was one of the best things that we learned on that project, because it wasn't a question of if, it was a recognition that it's an obligation for us here. And we now have to tap into the right experts to build that muscle for us as an organization and be listeners here. And so that to me was one of the best things that we took away from that was just the obligation that we have as humans, as marketers, to really advance that conversation. Yeah.
Yep, that ties perfectly back to what Maggie kicked us off with too. We're humans first, whether you're
Totally.
a consumer, an employee, we're all humans first. So thanks for that perspective too.
Of course.
Kind of coinciding with that too, when we talk about humans first and a different lens to the conversation around purpose. How do you think about building teams? Especially within the scope of the future of CPG and kind of what people are looking for too in their day-to-day, how the world has changed in terms of employees over the last 20 months or so. Can you speak a little bit to that and team building moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So I lead a team of about 7 or 8 marketers now. And one of the things I think that we've learned, well, there's sort of the kind of the obvious, which is we're all at home, right? We're all at home, and sort of the future of work, I think, has to change. And I think the empowerment that you give people has to sort of flex based on this new working model. And PepsiCo, I think, has been fantastic with a new model that we called Work That Works, which is, we've got intentional office time for collaboration where we need it. And then, beyond that, we sort of empower teams to sort of work both remotely or in the office as the teams see fit. So, I think team building and kind of culture building is one that is going to have to adopt based on that flexible model, where I think it actually is good. It gives people the power of choice. And it allows us to, I think, blend our work lives and our personal lives a bit more. So I'd say that's the first thing. The second thing is kind of going back to this higher level purpose and belonging, which is I do believe that as brands become take more of a recognition that on the impact that we have on culture, that there's going to be a requirement for organizations to have a shared value system with their employees. Mm-hmm. And that is both current employees, but also recruits and how you think about building teams. Is that shared value system is so important for recruiting the right type of individual into your organization, but also for retention as well. So ensuring that we are authentically engaging on the right conversations is just so important now. And I think that's a bit, it's again, a bit of a shift from where we were in the past, which it felt a bit more transactional on certain topics, whereas now it's very much intertwined, right? So, I think that's probably been one of the better things, again, to come out of the pandemic is the fact that, we sort of recognize that the shared value system is probably the first filter that you're going to have for team and culture building. And second is obviously some of the basics around, empowerment and some of the things that it comes with building teams. But I think that first filter on the shared value system is new, and I think it's positive. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm sure your team is very appreciative.
Yeah.
I'm going to shift to, we have some Q&A.
Sure.
So I'm going to shift over there, mix it up a little bit here. So we heard from someone that they recently read Indra, who's the CEO of PepsiCo's book, My Life in Full, and learned much more about PepsiCo through that. So the question is, what are some of the steps being taken to address the changing current customer needs? And I know you touched on this a bit earlier, but are there any specific examples maybe you can speak to?
Yeah, I mean, so we have a portfolio of brands at PepsiCo, and each of our brands are going to address different needs kind of based on how, that brand strategy, the consumers that we're going after, and those types of things. So I think that's one of the best things that, this organization kind of offers is we do have that portfolio where we can definitely engage in different ways, and we can talk to consumers in a variety of different ways that's authentic. So hopefully that answers your question, but I think it's more, it does come back to the fact that we do have a portfolio of brands that has an opportunity to both engage on different topics.
That's awesome. Building upon that too, how there's a question around support in terms of just leadership and the guidance and implementing the changes, right, that are being addressed.
Yeah, and that comes from the top, right? And that's, I think, one of the things that as you start, so I'm assuming the question behind the question are things around purpose, right? So purpose for brands and things like that. So as you sort of identify the role that your brand has in the world and the impact that you have on society and different cultural topics that you want to take part of, leadership buy-in is critical, right? And that's one of the things that we've had to see that's a bit different is it is critical to have that leadership buy-in. I think one of the things though that is a bit of a misnomer about purpose marketing is that it's all about equity. It doesn't really drive the business and those types of things. But I think what we've seen is as consumers require that shared value system, they're actually going to transact with brands that share those same values. And so we actually have seen that the data that we have is that, when you connect on a more meaningful level with consumers, it actually inherently moves the business as well, right? And so it's sort of a win-win-win for everyone, which is you've got the leadership buy-in, you're moving the conversation in the right direction for the consumer, and then it also moves the business along as well. So, I do think it's a bit of a misnomer that purpose marketing is somewhat just all about equity. I think it's actually one that is can be pretty impactful for the business as well, because consumers are actually going to respond positively and transact.
That's great. That's great. Another question for you as we dive
Sure.
in. Entering this new norm we speak about, I know you've uncovered quite a few learnings specific to consumer needs and the Juice Plus business and that have helped form that. What have surprised you the most in terms of learnings over the last, say, couple of years? What has really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think one which I mentioned, which is I'll say a couple things. Our ability to still run a really effective innovation project with everything being virtual. That was one as a leader for innovation that I was actually fairly concerned about, which is if we can't be in consumers' homes, and if we can't be actually talking to consumers, are we going to get the depth of insights that we need to really drive the business? And I think we've seen we actually can do that, right? So I'd say that would be kind of one of the things that surprised me the most. The second thing is, we had like the second highest penetration growth in all light refreshing beverages on some of our brands. And I think the role that we have in consumers' lives in a global pandemic was I think it was a reminder that our brands are very impactful, right? So Tropicana, for example, is one that has seen a huge resurgence of adoption due to the fact that we have things like vitamin C that consumers are really seeking. And that was, again, I think a bit of a surprise for us that it wasn't really a surprise. It was more of a reminder, I think, that our brands are incredibly important and ones that, are sort of going through a resurgence due to some of the things that we've learned through the pandemic.
Yeah, no, that's great. And two, I mean, you speak to the benefit of having this really robust portfolio, right? And Juice Plus within itself has that. But beyond that too, are you tying back to the broader PepsiCo portfolio and thinking in terms of partnerships and bringing that forth to consumers, whether it's in the form of innovation or just use cases and occasions?
Yeah, it's the beauty of PepsiCo, to be honest. It's one of the things where, if we want to drive a program, we've got call it a breakfast program. We've got a plethora of great brands that hit that occasion, right? So Tropicana and Quaker are sort of naturally best friends. If you can think about, doing a program that's scale across all of our brands. We've got a great brand with Health Warrior, which is sort of a small kind of emerging brand in the grains business as well, that was more functional, and that could naturally be a good partnership with a brand like Kavita, which is in my portfolio as well, right? So it's the beauty of kind of having a bunch of different brands that are relevant in a bunch of different moments across the portfolio. But totally, we do think about doing scale programs across the business.
That's awesome. And I so appreciate just throughout all of your answers today too, like you have such a passion for what you do. So I wanted to ask you too, as kind of a bonus question here, like, is there anything that you're currently working on that you're just really jazzed about, you're really excited about?
Oh, I wish I could tell you, but I think that would give away too many secrets.
I try.
Yeah, I think that probably gives away too many secrets. I mean, we have some pretty awesome things that we are working on as a business, but I would say I will defer that one as to not give away our secrets.
That's awesome. And then too, just kind of a fun question here. I know we've both been in CPG for so long, but I always like to, when we talk about the human and the person, if you weren't in this position, if you weren't at PepsiCo, you were not in CPG, what would you be doing right now?
Oh my gosh. Well, I played soccer in college, and I would probably still be trying to do the grind where I would be out doing the professional tryouts and all these things and trying to make a career out of it. But I think my knees gave out on me too soon for that. So that was not in the cards. I actually asked that question to a lot of people who work for me on my team as well, which is, hey, if you didn't do this, what would you be doing? And it sort of gets to the more human level of people, who people are and how we can support them best. I think I would probably be trying to chase a career in soccer, which
I like it.
Yeah.
Very fun. Okay, back to the business. So when you think about the juice category and all the brands within the Juice Plus portfolio, when we're thinking about the future, what changes do you foresee? Think about like the next, say, 3-5 years. What does the category look like? What kind of changes do you think are around the corner?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges we have on our business right now, which is the acceleration and the adoption and penetration growth of our brands has been pretty massive. We've had years of penetration growth come in a short span of several months. And it's sort of our job now to nurture those new consumers to ensure that they stay within our franchise, but also within the category as well. And so I think I mentioned kind of early on in the discussion that immunity is a pretty big thing that we see because it's one that is sticking and it's one that it has relevancy for our brands, but it's also one of the reasons why consumers came into the category, right? So, hey, I didn't purchase juice for a while, but I think, now that I'm at home, we're in a global pandemic, you guys have an excellent source of vitamin C. I think I'm going to start purchasing juice again, right? So those are some of the things that we've seen, the reasons why consumers came into the franchise, and sort of it's our job now to nurture those consumers. And we'll do that in a variety of different ways, kind of based on the different unmet needs. But it is one where that's sort of on us now, right? It's on us as leaders to keep these consumers in the category.
Yep. Tapping in the category.
Yeah.
Awesome. A couple more questions popped up here.
Okay.
So we just talked long-term, thinking a little bit more short-term here. Are there any key things you're anticipating as we go into holiday?
Yes. So, well, a couple things. I would say our brands are absolutely relevant for the social occasion. So that is one where we definitely see that our brands, again, orange juice is one that I keep going back to, but I'll give you just a sort of a snippet of a story, but I'll call my kids down during the holidays to have pancake breakfast. And we do this, it's a tradition that we do almost every holiday. And when I call them down to have pancakes, they sprint down the stairs because they know it's going to be pancakes and orange juice. And they're really excited about that, right? If it's cereal, they don't really come down the stairs. They take their time, right? And so I think the relevancy that our brands have during social occasions and tradition and things like that are pretty important during holidays, and we see that as an important season for a lot of our brands. But I'd say that's probably the big thing, is just kind of going back on the nostalgia that we have to tap into during some of those holidays. So it is definitely a big one for our business.
Awesome. A couple more questions here for you. So someone asked, would love to know what trends you're seeing in the category as it becomes more crowded, which I think you've spoken to a bit, but how do you go about in what is becoming a more and more crowded category? How do you go about standing out?
Yeah, so there's, that's a challenge. I think you could even put that on almost any category, which is how does a scale leader continue to stay relevant and stand out in the category. So it's, part of our job is to really understand the unmet needs and why consumers don't shop the category. As a category leader, that's part of our job, which is to continue to attract consumers into the franchise. One of the biggest things we focus on is how do we continue to focus on sugar reduction. So that's something that we have definitely kind of on our radar as well. But it's also, talking to those consumers, again, that came in during the pandemic to the portfolio and understanding why they came in and how do we continue to nurture their needs. That's the biggest thing that we're focused on right now, is talking to those specific consumers, understanding their unmet needs, and then building a portfolio of solutions that continue to address those needs in the future. And there's a variety of different needs, and for proprietary reasons, I'm not going to jump into what some of those kind of critical insights are for our business,
Sure.
but I will say that that's our number one job. I mean, that is our number one job. It's less about macro trends that we think are important. It's more about those consumers that came into the franchise. How do we continue to hang on to them and then continue all of their kind of unmet needs to ensure the category continues to grow over time?
Awesome.
Yep.
I know we have a few more minutes here, so I'm going to go to the Q&A. What are you most nervous about going into 2022? And how are you mitigating that potential issue?
What are we most nervous about? I think the adoption of e-commerce has a lot of brand manufacturers playing catch up. I think that is happening across the business, and you'll probably hear that from a lot of different marketing leaders, which is we just have to rethink how we do business. Now, that doesn't make me nervous because it presents us, I think, with opportunity that I think some of the organizations that latch on to this massive growth in e-commerce that we saw over the past 2 years, they're the ones that are going to win. Right. And so I actually think that it does make me a little bit nervous because I think some organizations are going to have to play catch up. But I think the faster that we can get into market with specific solutions, that to go back to our original discussion on omni-channel specific to product, I think those are the organizations that are going to win. So it does make me a little nervous, but it's a healthy nervous where I get excited about it, to be honest, because I think it presents us with a ton of opportunity.
Yeah, I agree there too. And it's interesting too. I know Maggie had provided some insight to our team that there is also still a very strong presence. Like there's such a focus on e-commerce, of course, but there's still people and probably a little bit of a shift back to those who are going brick and mortar,
Totally.
actually shopping in store. So I love that there's like a focus on that. And of course it is a little nerve wracking, just making sure that you're staying up with that. But it is kind of reassuring too that not all of our eggs are in that basket, and that it will always constantly be shifting.
And I think we're going to probably see some emerging entrants into the space, because it's one that as we try to figure out how do we play catch up, that's a model that's ripe for innovation, right? It's right to be consumer first. It is right to be a model that is more seamless, I think, than it is today. And so I'm excited to see kind of how we as an industry catch up to that and come up with some solutions that work best for consumers.
Yep, I agree. And I see Maggie.
Hi.
Hi.
Corey,
thank you.
Awesome conversation, Corey and Rachel.
Thanks,
thank you guys
Maggie.
so much. That was such a great conversation. There was so many things I loved about it. I mean, obviously, Corey, hearing your perspective on innovation, especially as we think about consumers changing their behaviors, right? The resurgence of juice and light with immunity. I also really appreciated your emphatic accountability around cultural impact as stewards of the brand. I know this was earlier in the conversation, but that really stuck out for me as something that, and Rachel mentioned this, your passion. It's very tangible.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that particular emphatic accountability. I think it's important when we think about sustainability, when we think about activism, we all do play a bigger role than I think we even realize sometimes. So that was inspiring to hear. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm glad you like that.
Very much so. And then just hearing about how your take on innovation in general, I think I personally learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone on the phone could say the same. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for the thoughtful discussion. And Rachel, thank you for a masterful guidance to help Corey navigate. All right, guys, thank you so much. Well, we are going to move on to our next session. So I will relieve you guys, and good luck in California, Corey. And then I'd also like to welcome our next presenters. We're going to hear from an amazing multinational food manufacturing company, just a small one I'm sure no one's heard of. But please welcome Jordan Narducci, who's the Director of Global Direct-to-Consumer E-commerce at Kellogg Company. And moderating this session will be Casey Bergseth, our Vice President of CPG here at Veracast. And don't forget, we are live. So as we are getting these guys on, please feel free to use the Q&A widget below and ask questions. And we are very excited to hear from Casey and Jordan.
Maggie, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. Casey, how are you?
Doing great. How's your day going?
It's going awesome. This event has been more than I could have imagined. So I will also publicly thank Brand Innovators again, and I'm thrilled to hear from you and Jordan.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you. Jordan, what's up, buddy?
Hey guys, sorry, it took me a second to get my camera working.
Not to worry, we're live and we're here now, so ready to rock and roll.
Let's do it. Good to reconnect, buddy. Casey.
Yeah, good to see you. This is awesome. Looking forward to a good discussion today. I know it's been a packed calendar for everybody, so looking forward to you and I. Looking forward to learning a little bit and jumping into the e-com and D2C space. I'll just do a quick intro for me, and then maybe give you the sec to do the same. Nothing too long. But Casey Bergseth, I'm on the sales team here at Veracast. Got about 20 years in the CPG and digital space, and a decent amount off and on with Kellogg's over the years. So looking forward to learning a little bit more. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, buddy.
Yeah. So Jordan Narducci, as mentioned, I work at Kellogg. I sit on our global digital team focused on building out our direct consumer capabilities and strategy, and really just somewhat new to Kellogg. I joined a couple of years ago, came from more of a startup background. So excited to kind of dive into all things Kellogg today.
Love it, love it. All right, well, we got some good questions for you, but I think before we get too serious, maybe we can each start with, let's pick our favorite Kellogg's brand and maybe like a reason or two behind why that's our favorite Kellogg's brand. And you probably have a better story than I do. I'll let you go first. I'll set myself up for failure and let you go first with that.
Mine is going to be a surprise hit, I think, for many. Okay. And I always get an interesting reaction, but mine is actually on the All Brand side. I think All Brand is like one of our most underrated products out there. It's incredibly high in fiber. I've discovered the All Brand buds in particular, which are like a crunchier, smaller version. Think like instead of the longer version that you often find, and they're delicious, man. And I think fiber, which we'll talk about, I think, throughout today a little bit later. Fiber is the future, and I think anybody that kind of struggles with gut health issues, myself personally, I've dealt with some. It's making a big comeback. So I think All Brand's been at it for a long time, and I've recently rediscovered it.
All right, nice.
What about you?
Well, mine's a little bit of a funny story. Mine is my favorite brand is definitely the white cheddar Cheez-Its. I feel like it's something that once I have one, I have like 6,572 of them. So there was a night, my girlfriend and I were hanging out, watching a movie, and we were like, had the late night snacks, and she goes and grabs, a box of white cheddar Cheez-Its, and then brings them back, sets them in between us, like sitting on the couch with like a little armrest. We're nibbling before we know it. Like I reach my hand in there, there's nothing left in there, and I'm like, how many of these did you eat? And then she looks back at me with a good amount of attitude and said, how many of these did you eat? And then like we both just started laughing and like basically blaming each other. So not only are they a part of a great diet, they're also great for your relationship. So that's probably
I love it. I'm sure those conversations happen on a daily basis across relationships. And Cheez-Its are one of our favorite brands for sure.
A great unifier. All right, so now that we have that established, which I'm sure everybody was tuning in to hear today, why don't we jump in really quick? I know your space obviously is in the e-com umbrella. Why don't we just kind of set the stage with regards to the e-com space in general for you guys, and kind of where your world fits within the definition of e-com?
Yeah, so within global e-commerce, we kind of break it down into three main pillars. The main focus, like where we generate most of our revenue today, is what we call e-retail. So that's the pure plays like Amazon.com, the Walmart.coms, Tesco.com, all of the kind of online retail versions, and then even some of our like more emerging platforms, which is constantly evolving. Things like Instacart and DoorDash and all of these new convenience plays. All kind of fit into that pillar. Then we have B2B, which is probably a lesser known and less discussed pillar, at least in the CPG space. So this is like enabling e-commerce and a lot of AI to basically create optimizations for some of our smaller format stores. So think like convenience stores that maybe are like mom and pop, family owned, whatever. They don't always get like sales reps coming to them on a monthly basis, weekly basis, whatever. And so we've actually integrated a new platform that uses technology to say like, hey, actually in your area and based on the type of store you are, we've found that actually unlocking these kind of products can add a lot of value to you, and you can get a lot of traction. And so it makes recommendations. It does all sorts of really interesting stuff. Like you can take shelfies, we call it, where you can actually take photos of your shelves and get points. So it's like a rewards-based platform, uses a lot of the techniques that you would use for like a standard e-commerce site, and drives kind of incremental value. We're seeing a huge lift in people with and without the platform, is driving meaningful value. So the team's doing really cool work there. And then the last pillar, which is where I think we'll focus most of the discussion today, is on direct to consumer. And that's really just all about us getting closer to our consumers. Historically, we've always sold through our retail partners, and so with regulation and privacy becoming more and more in the news, we read about iOS updates and things like that. I think it's really important for us to start developing that relationship and owning that experience.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I know over the past, even since the pandemic kicked in, I mean, we've seen on the Veracast side, obviously, we've seen a huge increase. I'm sure this has been talked about for pretty much everyone out there in the CPG space and beyond. The growth of e-com, the bigger umbrella, has been nothing short of substantial. The growth across all three pillars that you kind of just mentioned, I'm sure, is going to follow a similar path forward, but in uniquely different ways. And I think DTC, which is your space, is something a little bit more custom and a little bit more nimble with regards to keeping you guys have a little bit more control over the space and the branding and the targeting and everything there. So I think that could be something, as we all move into the future, that'll be kind of a cool thing to kind of keep our tabs on. So that's great to hear. So that being said, within the DTC space, which we're seeing some growth in that area too, maybe just explain a little bit about the day in the life and what that means for you and your team, and kind of how you see that moving forward at Kellogg and in the industry.
Yeah. So there's kind of, I would say, two main areas that we focus on within direct to consumer. One is thinking about launching new brands, new products digitally first, much like a startup would in white space areas for us. So think like emerging trends, new areas that we're not playing today with our brands, identifying where those are, and then going after them with new executions. So we have a couple examples of that. And then the other area is starting to unlock and amplify some of our core brands. And I love that you brought up Cheez-It earlier, because that was actually one of our first pilots that we got off the ground for direct to consumer. Was with Cheez-It, and we've gotten some really interesting learnings there. And then we have a few more kind of in the pipeline. Future state, I think Kellogg as a company is a very decentralized organization. I sit on the global team, which is really all about bringing new capabilities, new technologies, and launching new things like channels, like the direct to consumer channel. And then scaling it up across brands. And so I think we will over time shift from a very brand driven, regionally driven approach today, which is where we are today, like what we did with Cheez-It. And we have some earlier acquisitions like RX Bar, who've been playing in the space for a long time. But I see a future state where we have all of our brands under one umbrella, or several of them unlocked where it makes sense, and selling direct. And I think then it gets really exciting because you can get some interesting learnings with cross selling across brands and all sorts of bundling and cool stuff so you can do based on occasions and gifts and things like that.
Yeah, I love it. So I could get some Pringles, I could get some Cheez-Its all wrapped in one. Then you'd know that Casey was a big fan of both, and we all kind of build on it from there. I love it.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I love the Cheez-It innovation. Obviously, you struck a chord with that example with me, and I'm sure millions of people out there. Do you have a good, cool example of an actionable, like, mature brand innovation that we can kind of chat through and kind of hear one of those brought to life?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cheez-It is the freshest, so I think that's probably the one that jumps out for me, and the one that I've kind of been most actively involved in, given I'm relatively new. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Cheez-It truly was a test and learn pilot for us. I think that's one thing I've kind of discovered as the way to get these things off the ground. It can be a heavy lift, but if you position it as a test and learn pilot, I think a lot of friction is removed. And I think for us, it was about how do we be a little more nimble. A lot of times, innovation can take a long time at CPG companies. And so we wanted to kind of test like this mindset of, can we launch something within 6 months? Can we develop a new flavor offerings, new products? We had a really exciting merchandise component to this, which I think when you're talking about food and direct to consumer, I think having a strong merchandise component to the offering where on the brands where it makes sense, like Cheez-It or Pringles, you named a couple. I think merchandise is a great way to kind of increase your average order value, increase, a lot of times there's great margin on apparel. There's a lot of kind of reasons for playing in that space. And so we were really just testing the waters with it. And I think what was really exciting was we went from ideation and kickoff to website going live in just about 6 months. So I think we kind of proved that we can be super nimble. And the way we did that was we launched 3 new flavors of our extra toasty lineup, and bundled them together with the original extra toasty. So it was a 4-pack. Again, that helps with your unit economics, and drives your average order value up. And I think overwhelmingly, I think what's just been pretty like amazing in working on these kind of power brands that I, coming from more of a startup background, didn't have the luxury of that before, is just the community that they have. I mean, we did a post that we were going to be launching. It was just a post with some cheese, with someone wearing some socks with Cheez-It branding on them, really cool socks. And we got an incredible wait list just from just one post of people that wanted to be the first to know about this new Cheez-It offering. So people are clearly like chomping at the bit for these kind of activations. And then when we went live, I think what's been really impressive is just the engagement we've gotten. We've seen essentially an 80% open rate on the emails that we've been sending.
Oh, wow.
And that's not just on that initial waitlist email. We got like that kind of traction. I was like, wow, that can't be sustaining. And it's sustained, and all of the emails we've sent afterwards have gotten similar open rates, and the click-through rates have just been also well above any sort of industry benchmark I've ever seen. And so I think the power of the brand and the engagement is really strong. And what we did was we coupled this new kind of bundle with a campaign that the brand has been doing over the past couple of years. Every year they do a wine and Cheez-It campaign, which is a really fun activation. You can imagine, you and your girlfriend dipping into that, and I think that's like where you can really start playing around with some of the activations that these brands do that are really strong and powerful, and combine it with a D2C offering that amplifies it. So that's a big strategy as we think about direct consumer as a channel. It doesn't always need to be incremental. It doesn't always need to be new, which we did have some new with these flavors, but we were able to tap into a campaign in terms of the creative and the PR and the outreach that they were going to do from a demand side generating perspective, that we could take advantage of and basically just give a call to action to come purchase. And so it was basically these like champagne coupes, because surprisingly, I think this was mind blowing to me that Cheez-Its, this is the 100-year anniversary of Cheez-It. So this year, as our 3rd annual wine and Cheez-It execution, we actually did these champagne coupes. And so you toast with the toasty lineup, to the 100-year with Cheez-It, which was really fun. And the coupes had this, like, it's hard to describe without showing an image, but it was basically, think a 1950 champagne flute coupe, and then underneath it was a built-in bowl where you could store your Cheez-Its and eat directly out of them. So it's just a really fun campaign. And I think, for us, again, it was kind of, let's throw some stuff out there, see what works, see what resonates. And I think overwhelmingly positive. And so now we're thinking about, how do we want to activate this in 2022? And I think really starting to tap more into those kind of activations that the brand already has in mind, and then combining it with like being able to bring these things to life a little faster, especially on the innovation side.
Man, I feel like you took DTC to completely another level with the wine and Cheez-It pairing. I am a huge fan of that. So first of all, if you guys have any need for focus groups or volunteers into 2022 and beyond, I know we have each other's information. Please put me on that list. And then secondly, man, if you guys have Cheez-It socks, I would love to rock like a 100-year like Cheez-It hoodie or something. It's getting to be a little chilly here in Minneapolis this time of the year. So if you guys have a hoodie or a winter hat, I could be a walking billboard for you guys every day of the week. So you let me know what you got there, and I'm on board, my friend.
You're setting me up because those are all currently available. So we'll have to. I'll be sharing some links and discount codes with you soon.
I can pay full price, buddy. I'm all about helping your margin out. Don't worry about it. All right, so that was a awesome example of a lot of things happening in the DTC space for you guys. I love the example, not just because it's Cheez-Its, but kind of bringing a couple of worlds together there for, true consumer experience and bringing things together that can be something that's fully customized for you guys in your business, and that's creative and out of the box, and it's fun to think about. It's fun to probably in your role, which I'm kind of jealous of your job right now, like the ideas and the ideations that would come from those types of thoughts across all of the portfolio products that you guys have. I mean, there's so many fun, cool things that you guys can action on. So I can imagine you guys have some cool things in store for all of us from the rest of this year as we come into holiday time, going into 2022. And then I know you have an international scope of things too. So there's got to be a infinite amount of thoughts, ideas, and strategies moving forward. So awesome example there. I know you mentioned kind of the breakthrough world for new items and new products. That was obviously like a mature brand with a new cool like innovation. Maybe another example that you could give and kind of talk through with regards to a breakthrough product or a breakthrough brand that maybe wouldn't be as familiar for everybody out there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's another brand. This was our first example of bringing digital activation to life. Is actually in the UK, and so probably most people haven't heard of it. But there's a brand we launched in the UK called Mwell, and that's really a brand in a completely new territory for us. I won't say completely, given what I just spoke about all brand, but this is in a new area for us, focused on the microbiome and really gut wellness. And, I think we see the science evolving in that space every day, the connection that you're able to make between the microbiome and fiber, prebiotic fiber, and some better for you ingredients that can drive, a meaningful impact on your overall wellness and health. And I think as the science evolves in that space, we want to be there and playing and be a leader in that space, like we have been with All Brand. And so we launched that about a year ago, and we've gotten some really incredible learnings so far on that. And we're now calling it like Mwell 2.0, which is really just emphasizing the model of direct to consumer as a channel. It's all about iterating and improving and learning from your consumers. And the whole reason you do it is the whole reason you launch through the direct to consumer is to do just that, right? The current model, that most CPGs do is they develop products. It can sometimes take some time because there's a lot of regulation and safety that goes into it for good reason. And then we put it on shelf, and I think a lot of times there isn't that direct connection to the consumer. And so this brand, we've gotten a ton of learnings just in the first few months of operating. And we're now using the language of Mwell 2.0 to just emphasize that like this journey is all about iterating. And based on the learnings we've gotten, we now are kind of improving the messaging, the communication, the branding is being updated a little bit, and then also the product offering. We launched with a whole robust kind of offering in different food formats, and really it was again a test and learn to learn which categories resonated most with consumers. And you get a lot of, again, similar to Cheez-It, we sent consumer feedback surveys to every consumer who purchases from us, with a ton of questions about like what they thought about the product, not just a rating and a review, but really dive into like consumer research on people who, I like to use the phrase, voted with their wallet, right? It wasn't just a online or qualitative or quantitative survey. It was like actually someone who went and purchased this from the online channel. So they're the best type of people to really dive into and get the best type of learnings and data. And so we've gotten a ton of learnings, and now we're thinking about like, how do we really scale this up based on those learnings? And the ultimate goal, I think, with this brand, and I think for all of the brands that we're thinking about in these white space territories, is to expand, to other channels and ultimately bring it into retail. But you got to make sure you get your messaging and all of your components and product offering right. And that's where I think, like, historically, startups, in the direct consumer space have always had a great kind of direct relationship with their consumers to understand their needs, in a really strong way. And so I think what you're seeing is like the Kellogg's of the world are moving more into this kind of digitally first mentality of what we call like transactional learning activations, which it's doing pilots, getting things off the ground faster, iterating, getting the messaging right, and then ultimately bring it to shelf. And by doing that, like, you should, in theory, improve your success rate, because you've gone through iterations, you've gone through messaging, you've figured out what resonates from a product and brand perspective best, and then you're bringing it to retail, much like our peers do in the digitally native space. And so I think it's been really interesting to see that kind of shift of big companies moving more into direct, and then you see all of the direct companies moving into more the traditional retail space. And that's oftentimes where you hit the scale and the profitability, like really drive both of those two areas. And so I think this kind of idea of omni is truly like the future. I know we've all been talking about it for 5 years, but I do think it's like truly now is the time that we're all kind of focusing on both channels. Really important.
Yeah, I love for both of those examples of innovation and breakthrough. It's really cool. And you mentioned the 80% open rate, and the people who, and I'm not as familiar with the MWell world, but people who are willing to give you so much of their information. It gives you guys the chance to really learn kind of in the infancy, or in the, without the scalability of asking all these questions. You guys have like a good relationship one-to-one with your core users on MWell and on Cheez-It, to give you guys so much valuable information with regards to making it scalable, making it profitable, and doing it in the right way. So really cool to hear how that's working out and how you guys leverage that. And I'm sure there's all sorts of interesting examples. And I think, honestly, one of the cooler things for all of us, and we've all probably have different habits now than we did, 2 years ago or whatever, with regards to the e-com space, is when you have that big of a kind of a paradigm shift in consumer behavior, like the demand forces all of us to react, to create like the future of e-com and the future of DTC and the future of these types of events. So it's cool that, you get to play and have a front row seat and participate and drive how all this stuff happens across your brands and across different countries across the world. So it's pretty cool to hear you chat through some of those examples and how that's going to kind of pave your way and color its way into the future.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I think, one of the stats I'll just throw out there, when we did that survey for the Cheez-It fans, we asked them, like, would you be willing to leave your email address for us to kind of email directly to you to ask specific questions and maybe even hop on a call to dive into some, to get your feedback at a more granular level, or for future innovations we're thinking about. Yeah. 87% of people said yes and left their email address. And so it's just like, again, the power of these communities. And I think similarly, MWell is much earlier in its journey, and it's a lesser known brand, and it's just getting kind of its start. But, again, like the amount of engagement you can get from consumers, and I think just asking for help, right? Like, everybody's been a new brand, a new entrant, and I think people are much more willing to help than most people realize. And I think that's the power of this channel, is that one-to-one.
Yeah, I love it. We all probably get so many requests and asks for like email spam and all these things coming in. But yeah, for certain brands and certain products that you have like a little bit more of interest in and have some long-term equity built up or interest in, like I would be more receptive to, obviously Cheez-It's the example of the day, but that's a really cool way to build upon. And I would be willing to have a quick convo or chat through some cool ideas or whatever. Whereas most things that we buy would be a commodity, or maybe you wouldn't have any form of a funny story behind it, or it's more of a commodity based. But for something like that you have an affinity for, you're willing to give a little bit more, because then you feel a little bit empowered as a consumer, kind of changing that direction of how things might move for the brand or for the distribution moving into the future. So kind of a cool way to share that experience with your top shelf consumers of whatever brand it may be.
Yeah, and I think just building on that, I think when you tap into this like exclusivity angle, that's a big this idea of like drops, right? Like that started with sneakers, and now it's kind of moving into more in the CPG space of like being one of the only people ever to have this product, right? I think people are much more willing to be like, wow, like I'm like one of the few that got to try this. Yeah, I'll give you some feedback, right? Like, and similarly, when you're a new brand and you say like, look, we're a new brand, like we truly want to improve this based on what we hear from all of you, and we're on a journey together. And I think especially people who have suffered from like gut health issues think people want to find like the right solution for them that works, that's easy, that's effortless, and I think that's what we're trying to get at with Imwell, but still tastes good, doesn't impact on taste. And so
Yeah.
I think people who have gone through some of those challenges, I think, are much more willing, and they're proactively looking for these type of solutions. So I think, I think that's what we're able to tap into in those two spaces. And there's a lot of other, white space territories that we're going after that we haven't talked about, but similar, I think there's going to be these kind of communities as we bring them to life.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine with an Emwell, like a newer innovation breakthrough, international scope, and then a Cheez-It mature brand. I'm sure there's many other examples like of all the other ones. And I know you've been around in this role for roughly 2 years or so, but has there been, I can imagine, logistics, supply chain, et cetera, from a challenge perspective, like, has there been some top-notch lessons learned or lessons that you can apply towards any other brands that you've kind of learned about moving into the future?
Yeah, I mean, for us, let me first preface. I'm not having to go through the challenges with supply chain right now,
Okay.
because we are creating a completely separate operating model. So I think like I've had the luxury of not having to, my direct kind of initiatives that I'm working on haven't been struggling with that as much. But I will say, even that touches you, from an ingredients and supplier perspective. And I think the team, first it was COVID, and now, like coming out of it, it's with all the ports and everything that's happening. I mean, the team's doing an incredible job, but it is tough out there for the supply chain across the industry. So my hat goes off to everybody who works in that space. I think for us, I think, it's really about doing things differently, right? Like Kellogg is a 115-year-old company that's been doing things a certain way, really efficiently. They're really good at, at doing things the way that we do them, which is all about scale through retail partners, building these great brands. And when you start talking about, doing things completely different, right? Like launching things outside of our typical SKU to market process, and using things like our pilot plant to bring these small batch productions to life and be a little more nimble. And then you talk about a new channel, like where you do what we call always on marketing, right? Like that's new to us, right? Like we're not used to having this kind of always on engagement strategy. It usually comes in bursts. And so I think this whole model of direct to consumer is challenging in its own right. And I think for me, like the big lesson learned, and I touched on this at the beginning, is like positioning these more as test and learn pilots, and then iterating on them has been successful for us, because it doesn't take a huge commitment then, right? You're not like setting up the whole kind of the next 3-year plan for, and it's like, no, let's test the waters, let's bring it to life like we did with Cheez-It. It resonates. So now we're talking about what's next, right? But it's like, let's just start with dipping our toes in the water. And then I would say the other thing that we're doing a lot of is building infrastructure that enables that. That's like a big thing coming out of the pandemic. The way we've been doing it with these test and learn pilots is great, because it allows us to get things going quickly. And we want to continue to be able to do that. But the one thing that doesn't happen is it doesn't fully integrate into all of our systems. And so what we are doing, like I said at the beginning, RxBar has been, at kind of an acquisition that we did for quite some time, but we're now taking some of the learnings from them and going to be able to leverage some of the technologies that they've been using and really build it into our infrastructure, so that, when we do want to bring on a new brand through this channel, we can kind of like have a templatized solution where it's kind of easy to, unless it needs, a very specific use case like personalization or something, we should be able to bring things to life in a really quick way, but then it will be fully integrated. Like, I think particularly, we haven't touched on this at all, the first party data element, right? Like a big core reason why most CPGs are playing in the direct to consumer space is around first party data, and making sure that it's now flowing into all of our systems so that we can take advantage of it and actually use it. It's not just about collecting data. It's like, how do you then go leverage the data? And for us, it's about, creating lookalike campaigns based on people who have purchased from us, and then driving media efficiency through those kind of campaigns. And so for us, it's really important not just to capture the data, but then to actually start using that and set up the data governance and the privacy policies and all of that to be able to do that across brands in our portfolio.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And yeah, in our world and in your world, and I think the media and CPG space, the first party data obviously for a lot of us is gold, and that's a way. This is a great way, and you're in a great spot for the ground level build up to get people to share that data, and then you build it out, you share it out, and then how do you activate against that? How do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it relevant? How do you make it scalable? And then yeah, with your RX bar example, I mean, it's a great acquisition. It makes a lot of sense, especially with where things are going now, maybe at a faster pace than anybody would have known back when that was more fresh and hot off the presses. That's going to be a great way for you guys to learn some lessons and some processes that have already been in place at an RX bar and bring it to life. Maybe to your point, save some money on time, get everything ready to rock and roll because you already have something that's already been successful, and you can learn from that as you apply it to the Cheez-Its and the M-Wells of the world. So cool to hear. That's awesome. It's amazing. Wrapping up here. Actually, we got a Q&A that popped in. Let me see here. Is Kellogg's activating around purpose initiatives within the direct-to-consumer pillar?
Yeah, that's something we started talking a lot about. I mean, I think what we've done, again, early days, is really tap into kind of the master brand plans that they have activated. And a lot of that is around these give back components. And so, I don't think I can speak to exactly what we have in the works. But yeah, I think purpose-driven marketing is critical to this channel. And I think one of the things that I think we could do a lot more of is tapping into the campaigns that we have as an organization that we already have doing really great work, but making sure a component of that is making sure each of our new initiatives are actually laddering up to that. So I would say we're in like the early stages of D2C as a whole, as kind of like the proof of concept stages. But as we think about 2022 and beyond, that is some of the conversations we've been having around how do we tie it up to each brand's individual purpose-driven marketing initiatives, and then how does that drive up to Kellogg as a company, which is doing a lot of really cool stuff that often we don't even do a good enough job of, I think, talking about, but some really cool campaigns there.
Nice. Love it. Cool. I know we're getting a little bit close on time. Maybe this can be, we'll see how the timing goes here, but if you could do, and this has been a great back and forth, I feel like I'm excited about a couple of different things, selfishly and professionally. So great job with that. I'm super envious of your position and kind of hear and learn more about how things are going to evolve as we move into the future. But if we could, if there could be one thing or one lesson or one takeaway for the folks that have joined us today and been listening to kind of our back and forth, what do you think is one or two top lessons to kind of take away from our chat today?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the conversations I have internally at Kellogg, I like to use the phrase, direct to consumers is not like a channel you just turn on, right? Like it takes time to really build the muscle to be able to play in this space. And it takes a lot of iterating. And yes, there are brands out there that get it right on its first instance and just, hit this rocket ship growth. But I would say the majority of brands that launch through the direct to consumer channel, it takes time before they're, being talked about as a leader. I think, like Nike and some of the players like in the confectionery space, I think have been at it for a long time and they get talked about a lot, but I think when you go back to like their earlier days, it took them a long time. It's a journey to kind of get to that state of being considered a leader and being talked about as such a strong channel. So I always give the advice of like, you got to just start now, right? And it's progress over perfection. And that's the whole point of this channel is like, I think we in the CPG industry, we spend a lot of time getting the perfect right product ready, and I think what we need to do more of and what we can do more of through this channel is really focusing on progress over perfection and bringing things to life a little faster and not sacrificing at all on safety or any of the really important things, but I think just really having a platform to execute, be nimble, and launch. So I would say just get started, start building your muscle because it's going to take time most likely.
Love it. I love the progress over perfection. I think probably a lot of us out there could use that in our personal and professional lives. So that's a good parting, some good parting advice. We do have a couple of questions that rolled in here. So let me just see if we can get to one last one here really quick. Yeah, what would you say are the key areas of digital transformation on the D2C side, or more broadly for you in your role now?
Yeah, I think for us, it was like first figuring out like where's the value for a company like Kellogg. So it starts with the strategy. Like that was the first 3 to 6 months. And this coming from the startup space, a lot of times you just throw things against the wall and see what sticks. I think with a company like Kellogg, you really have to have a strong point of view on where's the value to be had, and then how are you going to go capture that value. So I think digital transformation starts with the strategy and identifying like where are the pillars you want to play, and then laddering that up to what are the key brands or initiatives or projects that can help you kind of bring that strategy to life. And so that's what we've done with some of these kind of proof of concept launches. And I think now we've gotten some momentum combined with, obviously the pandemic, I think has set us up for having the conversations around like infrastructure and operating model and scaling to several different brands. So I think you just kind of have to have the strategy in place and then do a couple kind of pilot, test and learn activations against that to get some momentum, some early wins. And then that's where you can really, I think, bring your strategy to life more holistically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. Appreciate it. Well, I think we're right about here at time. So I just want to give you one last thank you. This was an awesome discussion. I truly did enjoy it. I feel like I learned a lot, which hopefully means that all the attendees were in the same boat. It's just really cool to hear about all the innovation and all the change that you guys bring across your awesome portfolio of brands. And it sounds like there's all sorts of fun stuff that you guys are working on for 2022 and into the future. So big thanks again for all your contributions and the time today. And with that, I see Maggie popping up on our screen here. How are you?
Hi, good. I echo those sentiments. That was an awesome discussion, particularly, with the e-commerce and D2C angle as well. So completely agree. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us and for that thoughtfulness. I have to say, on a personal note, I was trying to think about my favorite brands. I think it's a tie between Fruit Loops and Corn Pops, both nostalgic for me. Fruit Loops being like, I ate it every day as a kid. Yeah. And then Corn Pops, my mom eats every morning, literally her entire 71 years on this earth. So both just such fondness and nostalgia that comes forward. So thank you for that. And then on Absolutely. The business, yeah, I love it. And I love the all brand choice. I was not expecting that from you. So I liked that plot twist.
That's the ball.
That was a good plot twist. But on the business side, I loved your take on D2C. There's so much great content in this conversation, but it's fun. I was thinking a lot about, and Casey, this will ring true for you, I'm sure as well, just the connectivity of wanting to create that personalized relationship with the consumer and their willingness to do so, right? We have a story, I think, that consumers don't want that, but they do when executed in the right way. And I loved hearing you talk about that, because that's a big part of what we're doing at Veracast, bringing our Velasas Media Services and then our NCH audit and settlement services together, right? To then start to really look at coupons less as a commodity, but more as an opportunity to drive consumer change. Where if we deliver a high value offer, something to that effect, can we motivate them? Is that enough to motivate them to want to engage with us in more of a direct way? And then allow us to then drive a more meaningful relationship as we move forward. So it was very, very insightful and very helpful, even as I think about what we're doing at Veracast.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I think the key is just being authentic in all things that you do, and then building the community around it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's 100% right. Well, thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Casey, for navigating that conversation and for all of the fun anecdotes for your life too. The Cheez-It story had me cracking up.
Thank you both. This was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your day.
Likewise.
See you. See you guys.
All right. We are going to continue to our next session. I am thrilled to announce that we have with us today Sophia Colucci, Global Vice President of Miller Family of Brands and Economy Portfolio at Molson Coors, moderated by the wonderful Kevin Leary, an Executive Director on our CPG team here at Veracast. So thrilled to have them and excited to hear what they have to share. And look at that swag, Sophia. Literally living the brand. I love it.
Oh yeah, I put it on especially for you.
I'm obsessed. I want one for myself.
We have a shop site. You can go buy them.
Perfect. Look, plug in that D2C platform already. I love it. Awesome. I'll let you guys take it from here. Excited to hear your content.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Maggie. Hello, Sophia. Good to see you again.
Hi, nice to see you too.
You too. So I will say I am very excited to chat with Sophia for a variety of reasons. One of which, personally, as a fan of many of the products within the Molson Coors portfolio, may have tried many of them responsibly, of course, over the past few years with COVID and everything else. But very excited to chat with you. And before I guess we kick it off, I kind of want to steal a little bit what Casey mentioned, because you guys are such a fun company. You have so many fun brands. You get to do so many cool, unique, experiential things. Just like really fun things with your brands. I'm curious, to hear from your perspective, and also let you introduce yourself, because you have quite the resume and background. But talk a little bit about maybe one of your favorite brands, maybe one of your favorite newer brands. So I'll start it off and kick it off before passing it over to you. For me, living here in Atlanta, I really have two favorite brands. One smaller, Terrapin, one of the beers that is under the Molson Coors umbrella. But it is one that is native to Athens, Georgia, where I went to college. And it is also one of the official beers of the Atlanta Braves, my baseball team, which hopefully we close out tonight. And then also Topo Chico. That has been something that has infiltrated our refrigerators here at home as a delicious hard seltzer. So with that, Sophia, what are your favorites? And please introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. And this is a lot of fun. And I love already that you spoke of some of my favorite brands in the portfolio as well. So just introduce myself. I'm Sophia. I lead the Miller Family of Brands portfolio, and then as well our economy portfolio. So Miller Family Brands would be like Miller Lite, Miller Genuine Draft, Miller High Life, Miller 64. And then with economy, we have a whole bunch of different brands. Keystone is a big one that sometimes people reminisce with their college drinking days, once they were legal, of course, to drink. And then in terms of some of my favorite brands, we have so many brands within our portfolio, and a lot of new ones that we've created as well, including Topo Chico that you mentioned. I guess for me, while I love Miller Lite, obviously, I am a big IPA fan, and we have some really good IPAs in our portfolio, like Terrapin. There's one from our friends in Hop Valley, which is actually one of our Oregon brands that we have now been starting to distribute nationally, and it's called Hop Valley Bubble Stash. I think I'm like the biggest fan, and I've gotten everyone in the North Shore of Chicago to buy Bubble Stash because I would carry it with me on the beach all the time. So that's and yes, and it is in a green can, so it's you would definitely see it if you go to a Binny's or to a Mariano's. So that's a great beer. I also love Peroni, just in terms of the brand itself, and my last name is Colucci, so I'm Canadian, I'm Uruguayan, but then Uruguayans, there's a lot of Italians there too. And there's something about just Peroni and the brand and feeling like I'm in the Amalfi Coast, which I absolutely love. So it's hard, but those are two of my favorite brands here in our portfolio. And then in terms of me, I spent the last 4 years here at Miller. Before that, I was at PepsiCo. So I actually, one of your other panelists, Corey, I know him from my whole PepsiCo network. And then before that, I was at a Canadian food company, Maple Leaf Foods in Toronto.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I love how you mentioned Peroni, because especially during COVID, when there was obviously no international travel, enjoying a Peroni, pretending you're actually at a cafe somewhere in Rome or wherever, that definitely might have happened in my backyard.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, let's get into the meat of the conversation. So obviously the theme today is, kind of the future of CPG marketing, which I love. I kind of love how, generic it is, but also, what is the future of CPG? But before we kind of, talk about the future, let's kind of quickly talk about the past, because obviously the last couple of years have been a little strange, just slightly, given a pandemic. We're kind of hopefully coming out of the pandemic, getting to some sort of normalcy. But I'm curious, what did you guys learn as a company, and how are you taking those learnings to kind of apply it, for future, as you kind of move into the future?
Yeah, so I think there's so many fun and interesting and crazy stories that a lot of people could talk about from a marketing perspective in the last year and a half. And I know it's such a buzzword and people talk about it all the time, but this idea of being agile and flexible and be able to optimize things along the way. I think thankfully, we had already adopted a little bit of that mindset even before the pandemic. So we had adopted a mindset within our marketing team, we called it fast, messy, awesome, which was recognizing that, in order to be modern marketers, like things move quickly and you got to keep up. It's not always going to be perfect. So you have to be okay with making mistakes and learning from them and quickly getting things better. And then awesome, we just push for great work and we're proud of the work we do. And not everything is going to be a home run, but we definitely have a lot of fun with it. And the results that we see from consumers who are reaching for our brands show it. So having that mindset as we got into the pandemic, when we suddenly realized that, at the time, I was leading the innovation team. So this was before I was leading Miller. And we had our biggest innovation pipeline at the beginning of 2020 that we were launching for the past 5 years. So it was a huge pipeline and we were launching all these things in February, March, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hit. And, we had to make choices around product availability and where we were going to be focusing our support for our brand. So even those first few months working with our senior leaders, our sales teams to make those choices. And then, I came into leading the Miller team in July of 2020. And again, it was one of those situations where we had started with a campaign. We had launched it before the pandemic, which was called the Original Social Media. And the idea behind it was celebrating Miller time when you're with your friends, being yourself, drinking a Miller Lite. But it's about putting your phone down and getting to the bar and being with your real friends, which is great. The only problem is in the middle of the pandemic, we actually needed social media and we couldn't really go out of our houses. So part of that too was actually, coming into the role and realizing while it was a fantastic campaign, it didn't work for the world we were living in. So how could I think of other ways to bring our brand point of view into the world and think about things that felt culturally relevant where Miller Lite still had a place? And so a lot of the work that my team has done in the last year and a half has been focused around that.
Yeah, makes sense. And I mean, especially during a time, understanding that a lot of your business, sales-wise, revenue-wise, dollars-wise, units-wise, is, that on-prem business. And obviously that didn't exist for, almost a year and a half, depending on the city, I guess. And so I guess, with that said, what were some of the things, and I know you had mentioned you may have some examples you want to show, but what are some of the things that you did to make it exciting? Because you couldn't, go to bars, couldn't go to restaurants, couldn't go to stadiums, movie theaters, all that stuff where, a lot of your business is done. So it's interesting to hear, some things you guys did to sort of replace those experiences.
Oh, for sure. And now, like a good marketer, I have visuals and even videos. So I'm in it. And now we are Microsoft Teams users in this company. So I'm not quite as skilled on Zoom, but let me try to share my screen and see if this is going to work. So if you give me a second, we didn't do a test run beforehand, but let's give this a roll and see.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to share sound. Okay, and then I wonder if I can share my actual screen. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. And then I'm going to try to actually do this so you can see it. Okay. All right. So the first thing was, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to show video though, so that might be too advanced for me, but at least I can show you some of the images that we have. But one of the first examples that I'd like to talk about was a really fun idea that we came up with, which was the Miller Lite Cantenna. And what this is, it's a real, actual Miller Lite with a virtual antenna attached to it. So you can stream television shows while drinking a Miller Lite. And so the idea was that people couldn't get out to the bars and they couldn't be with their friends, watching the football games. And we know there's a lot of cord cutters out there. In fact, like 40% of our consumer targets were actually cord cutters. So we wanted them to have a chance to be able to win this Cantenna to watch football games at home while they were stuck in the pandemic. So that was just a great example of something like that. And we launched it right at the beginning of football. And we got a ton of PR around it. So what you're going to see too is that, when we talk about marketing, we definitely have a lot of, the classic paid media where we have television spots that we run during sports games, but we also do a lot of just culturally relevant marketing that is actually just about getting people to talk about us and getting to be part of pop culture, but doing it in a way that feels right for the brand. So this was a really fun one. It got a lot of attention and it felt right for Miller Lite. So that's an example. The next one is farewell work holiday parties. So this was actually one where we planned a little bit ahead of time, but I think it was like when I first started the brand, it was probably in July or August. We started talking about, well, what are we going to do for the holiday season? And actually, as a brand, we know a lot of people are drinking alcohol. Beer is definitely a brand a liquid that people are consuming. But we know that people weren't going to be doing things that they typically would be doing. And at least we thought that. So we had to take a little bit of a gamble. And one of the things that we thought was, people are probably not going to be going to office holiday parties because those probably aren't going to be happening. And do people actually want to be going to holiday parties in the offices, or is that just something that's a little bit forced and awkward? So what we did is we did a quick poll with consumers, and we found that 43% of them actually were happy that those parties were going to be canceled. And what we did is we actually
Sophia, sorry to cut you off. Are you able to show in presentation mode? Because we're actually not able to see that the work holiday
let me take
slide.
a quick look.
Sorry to cut you off there.
No, not at all. More slideshow options. Can you see the next slide? No.
Yeah, now we see it in presenter mode, so we kind of see notes to the side.
Okay. Let me just.
Yeah, we see slide 3. I know these are always gets a little tricky trying to share.
Show grid video. Show small. You know what? I can also stop sharing it if that's fine too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so then we had canceled holiday work parties, and it was one where we actually created a exhibit in the LACMA, and we partnered up with an artist, and she created these statues, wax statues, which commemorated what those forced holiday work parties were like. And we had an exhibit in the LACMA, and then we used that exhibit and the content to develop an actual TV spot that we aired, which showed people in this memory of a holiday work party. And then the juxtaposition was having Miller Lite and Miller time with your friends. And so it was really about, taking things that were probably going to be happening, during the time of the pandemic and figuring out how to make it work for our brand. There was other things that we did as well too, as the months continued on. So in March, when we knew that people wanted to be out in the bars, watching March Madness, we actually created bar candles, which smelled like the bars. So bringing the smell of bars to you. So whether it was dive bar, and it was pretty ridiculous. We even we even like described them in ways that, really felt true to the brand. And it got so much attention, it actually got onto Saturday Night Live. So it was like the type of things that we do to stay culturally relevant. We launched Vax Time t-shirts, so that they were called Almost Miller Time. So when the vaccines were coming out around April time, we created a very simple t-shirt with a sleeve cut out, and people could use them to get vaccinated. And so that was a little bit of a, it was a risk, but it was a calculated risk because we knew that we were taking a stand around vaccines. And it was something that we felt strongly about as a brand, and we felt really good about it. And then on some of our other brands, so for Miller High Life, Miller High Life is a brand that's definitely associated with dive bars. And we actually, last summer, when we knew people were desperate for patio furniture, we had a chance to win Miller High Life patio furniture. And it was something that, again, got a ton of earned media. So it was around just, staying and keeping a pulse on what was happening in the world, and how we could connect it to our brands.
Yeah, that's so fun. And I mean, like I said earlier, you guys have so many fun brands to kind of play with and make it exciting. And the one thing I will say for sure is I don't think the virtual happy hour is ever going away. Prior to the pandemic, I don't think I ever had a Zoom or FaceTime or whatever it may be happy hour, but those are consistent. I actually have like standing ones now with like friends and family every month. So it's pretty awesome you guys are able to capitalize on that. And hopefully you guys did not create a candle from Uptown Lounge, the bar I would frequent in Athens, Georgia when I was in college there. That would not smell very good. Well, cool. Well, thank you for sharing some of those examples too. So kind of moving on a little bit and talking a little bit more, I guess about the future. So the one big thing we've seen an influx, certainly at Veracast, but really in the industry over the last year, and as we kind of move forward, whether it be because of privacy concerns or just ensuring that you guys are optimally spending your dollars as finite as you possibly can in terms of the audiences that you're reaching and what have you. So I'm curious, given obviously the consumer journey has really changed a lot in terms of how they interact with brands, how they buy brands, where are they buying brands? I'm curious, over the past few years, this term sort of first party data is obviously become very important, very, very, very unique. And I'm curious from a standpoint of, for you guys trying to, ensure you're providing the most relevant messaging, what are a couple of examples of you tapping into the first party data? How important has it been for you and your brands? And how do you see its use given, again, like I mentioned earlier, all the privacy concerns?
Yeah, for sure. So this is a very relevant topic right now. And obviously, as a company, we take it really seriously to make sure that anything we do, we're doing it in a lawful and ethical way, and making sure that we're being really transparent when we're asking people for data, that it's something that they want to provide. And the reality is we look at it as like something that's like mutually beneficial. So what kind of information do they want to give us, and what kind of rewards do we want to give them? And so like for us, like knowing more about our consumers is going to be able to help market to them better and to access them better. And if you think about different brands, as a beer brand and all of the different beer brands, we've got a lot of value we can add. So we just like mentioned like this Coke, for instance, like merchandise is something that's huge for our consumers, and they want to wear our t-shirts and our hats. And it's like, I'll be walking down the street and people will stop me for my coat or my hat. And that's the kind of item that actually, people will provide first party data for, and they're happy to because they love the brand. And so we definitely use that in a really strategic way to build relationships with our consumers. And we've been doing it more and more. So whether it's like at a large scale with, everything from t-shirts to hats to tickets, or whether it's something that's a little bit, more unique and even more coveted. So I think a great example of this one is we did a partnership this summer with New Balance, and you would probably ask yourself why, but New Balance, for people who've been around for a while, and it's becoming a bigger thing, they kind of it's almost become a cultural thing where when people become first-time dads, they get a pair of the New Balance running shoes, like the dad shoes given to them as a joke. And so we partnered with New Balance to create the first ever shoesie. And what that is, it is a koozie for your beer to hold your beer made out of a New Balance shoe. And it sounds ridiculous, but I'm happy to say it blew up the internet. I think we got into like 25 different countries. Like it was going around the world. We were in Hypebeast. We were in tons of different publications. And it was because people were jumping for an opportunity to get one of these. And it was the type of initiative and item that people were happy to provide first party data for, because it's something that they really, really wanted. So I think these are like examples of the types of things that we do.
Yeah, making it fun, making it interesting. That's, man, this is you're kind of making me jealous from a job standpoint. So perhaps we can chat after this. No, Maggie, I'm not going anywhere. I promise. Just want to learn a little bit more. But that's great. That's great. So, talking a little bit more, about the changes, right? I know, obviously, you had mentioned earlier, you guys are very sensitive, very understanding of, making sure that you're doing everything from a legality perspective, and also, talking about responsibility from a drinking standpoint, all that stuff. There's been a ton of change, and I think there's always been, change in your categories, over the years, and that's obviously a lot of fun. But besides innovation, which innovation I think drives a lot of the change that, as the average everyday consumer kind of, sees, on the shelves at our grocery stores, liquor stores, what have you. Kind of besides that, what have you kind of seen in the alcohol category that really has been the most profound change or dynamically changed? And how has your team kind of reacted to those changes in the marketplace?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, this is it's an alcohol, it's in CPG, it's across like multiple industries, but just the way people consume media and this idea that the traditional vehicles that we would have used, like we have to be a lot smarter and we have to think creatively about ways to attract and engage with consumers. And so it's sometimes it's actually, being really smart and using even things like television in the most efficient ways. And other times it's thinking outside the box and thinking about other vehicles. And a lot of time it could be earned media to try to connect with consumers. And, when you're a company like Miller Coors, like while we have really big brands, believe it or not, like Miller Lite actually doesn't have the biggest media budget relative to some of the other beer brands that are out there, which is shocking because it's a huge brand, but it's still like there's even bigger ones. So we have to be very smart about how we go and reach in to talk to consumers. So I think a really good example of this is around Super Bowl time. So, for Super Bowl, like it's kind of common knowledge how much people spend to get 15-second, 30-second spot on air during Super Bowl. And so, for instance, this past Super Bowl, our brief was how do we get, our share of attention, knowing that we're actually shut out from the Super Bowl because our competitor is there. So even if we wanted to be a part of it, we couldn't. And so we had this example. And so we're, how do we also make sure that whatever we do feels right for the brand? And Miller Lite has always been a fun challenger type of brand. And one of the things that we're very proud about is that we're a 96-calorie beer that actually tastes great. It tastes like a beer. And in fact, if you compare it to a competitor of ours, McUltra, for one more calorie, because McUltra has 95 calories, for one more calorie in Miller Lite, you get more taste. And it's something that consumers, like, when they hear about it, go, like, I didn't know that. And Miller Lite's a great beer for only one more calorie. So what we did for the Super Bowl actually was we created a 856 character URL. And by that, it was a URL, a website where if people went onto this website, which basically said, type this website while your McUltra ad is on during the Super Bowl, you will burn 1 calorie and we will deliver and we will give you a free 6-pack of Miller Lite. And in the time it took you to actually type this URL in, you burn that calorie. And we put this URL, we did this as a New York Times print ad. So people couldn't copy and paste it. They actually had to go to the website during the Super Bowl when the McUltra ad was on to type it in. And so that got that was so ridiculous, so much fun, and it got over 1 billion earned media impressions. And actually, like, the media channel that we use, like, we use good old-fashioned print. And so but it's an example where it got, like, it was all over the news. It got so much pickup on social just because it was clever. And I mean, like, I didn't come up with this idea. My smart agency partners did. But when we heard it, we said, this is brilliant. We're going to do it. But that's just a good example of how to, think outside of the box, like knowing that you're a challenger and you have to, really be creative and push in different ways. So I think that was an example of something that, is probably one of the most favorite parts of marketing that I did in the past year. Another one, which I'm really proud of, and I think, again, is like very true to the brand, is on Miller High Life. So Miller High Life has always been the champagne of beers, and we're very proud of that. And I mean, people can say it in an ironic way, just knowing that sometimes you drink it in a dive bar, but it's actually, it's been around since 1903. It's a good quality beer and people love it. And we're proud about being the champagne of beers. And so one of the things we thought was, well, Miller High Life is brewed in Milwaukee. So shouldn't Milwaukee have its own champagne of beers region, just like France has its own region? And so we actually, we lobbied to make this happen. So we worked with our government team here at Miller Coors, and we have officially put the Champagne of Beers region on the map. So if you Google map this, you can see it's there. We had a whole campaign around it. We had spots, we had a TV spot. We now have a sign by our brewery that proudly, calls out the Champagne of Beers region. My team went to the Milwaukee City Council and we signed the petition, and people across the country signed the petition, and they made this happen. So again, this was a very creative, out of the box. This is probably more using government and different ways of doing things to bring our brand point of view, but something that we're proud about because, it's never been done before and it felt really right for the brand.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Love it all. These examples are unbelievable.
I have one more I can tell you.
Go for it.
Because it's on a different brand. So I think many of the people here who would listen have heard about seltzers and the seltzer explosion that's happened. Even recently, I think that Saturday Night Live did a spoof of this, which is like every brand is launching a seltzer. And by the way, when I was on innovation, I did launch a number of seltzers, some that didn't work, some that worked really well, like Vizzy. We now have Topo Chico. So we have seltzers that we're really proud of in our portfolio. But for Miller, we're a beer. And we would never launch a seltzer. And so what we actually did was for Miller Genuine Draft, and this is one of the videos that, I'm not even going to try showing, but we created essentially a seltzer launch where we created a small little rocket ship. We took our competitor seltzers and we blew it up. But we said Miller is going to launch a seltzer, and we kind of teased it that way. And so of course, everyone on social media said, oh no, not another one. But then when we actually had the live seltzer launch taping, it was in fact us blowing up our competitors, which we had 3 million viewers watching live. So it was another example of us just doing things in an untraditional way to bring our brand point of view to life.
Love it. Love it. Just out of curiosity with all these examples, and I know it probably varies depending on the initiative and what the actual KPI is, but how do you historically, or how do you traditionally measure success? Is it about impressions? Is it about reach? You guys have a pretty robust, MMA analysis to prove out ROAS on some of these activations?
It's a great question. And I would say all of the above, and it depends obviously to your point on the scale and how big and how much we're investing in it. And we look at some of these initiatives like pebbles, rocks, boulders. Like a pebble could be just something fun, like our candles. Honestly, did not cost a lot of money. It was very easy to do. And we ended up getting a ton of impressions around it. But, for others that are more robust and comprehensive and where the investment is bigger, we do want to make sure that it's helping us achieve our KPIs. So some of the KPIs that we look at, like number one is it driving brand health? And we actually have trackers where we can look at, consumer perceptions around our brand and who we're trying to target around our brand, whether, awareness to like how persuasive something is. And so we can measure before and after seeing the brand act. And we have key KPIs that can measure like whether we saw a significant lift. So the brand health component is really big. I mentioned PR impressions. That's something like easy and it's, standard, and it's something that we can measure across different segments. So typically like a good brand act will be anywhere from 250 million to 1 billion impressions. And, we talk about the 1 billion ones are kind of like the unicorns, and sometimes everything has to work well together, but you also want to make sure that they're quality impressions too, and that the people writing about you are, where your consumer is actually, like the outlets that they're reading. And then you mentioned things like MMA. We work with MTA, which actually can look at, a specific initiative that you're working on and can measure the sales lift across it. So we have, because we actually do such creative and fun marketing, we hold ourselves to a really high standard to make sure that it's as measurable as possible. And in some cases, it's things that are a bit more traditional. In other cases, we're doing like continuous monitoring and more of on a scrappy way to make sure that it is effective and that we're learning. Great.
Love it. Let's switch gears just for a second, going over to the Q&A, because I want to make sure we get some of these questions answered. So one of the questions, and actually I was curious about this as well, is Miller activating media around purpose, social justice, DEI initiatives? And do you have any examples?
Yes, absolutely. So from a Miller perspective, part of our brand DNA is actually being an authentic and inclusive brand. So we are all about coming as you are. And, when we think about two groups that we're really focusing on, one is the LGBTQ plus community. And with LGBTQ plus, it's actually we have a long-standing history on the Miller brand supporting this community. Whether it was being part of events back in the 70s, we were one of the first companies to provide benefits for same-sex partners. We've been partnered with the Equality Federation now for years. And so we have a long-standing history of showing support for that community. But then we also have been really choiceful about how we're going to continue to show that support. So there's two initiatives that we launched this year. The first is one called Open and Proud. And our goal is to try to get every bar where Miller Lite is served in the US to be an even more inclusive bar. And what we actually started doing was this year, and obviously we had started it and we were in the middle of the pandemic, but we started going to bars across the country and hosting town hall events where we listened and learned from members of the community who told us about some of the opportunities and challenges. And from there, and so I was at one of the events here in Chicago, and from there, we're creating a playbook and training material so that we can actually share these and scale it up across bars across the US. So that's one of the initiatives. Another initiative that you guys can go on our website and see, we partnered up with a professor to launch a book called Beers and Queer History. And it celebrates, the role that bars have played throughout the last 30 years to provide a more inclusive space for members of the community. And, it really is focusing on the positives that role the bars have played. And so and all the proceeds go to the Equality Federation. So we believe that it's really important that everything we do here in this space is very much action oriented. So it's not just about only showing up during Pride or, having our out of home communication, with certain colors. It's not it. It's actually, we work with members of the community within our team, within our organization. One of our ERG groups has been amazing with this. We partner with the Equality Federation. I have members of my team who are part of the community, and they've been phenomenal in terms of just talking through it and really making sure that we are being real and authentic. So I'm very proud of that work that's been happening. Another big initiative, and I would say that this one we've probably gone bolder on, is winning with Latinos. And so this one's close to my heart, just being from Uruguay and having grown up speaking Spanish. We are under indexed with Latinos, and we know a lot of them are definitely drinking Modelo and Corona, but a lot of them are also drinking Bud Light and Michelob Ultra. And if you think about a brand like Miller Lite, actually, just standing for authenticity, it very as much connected to the mindset of Latinos. And then the other thing too is we do have that more beer taste, which we've seen with Latinos, like it's something that they're looking for. So we knew that we actually had the credentials to win. We just had really low awareness. And so what we wanted to do was something that could kind of ignite and get people excited. And so we made the really strategic choice to partner with one of the biggest reggaeton singers there are right now, J Balvin. He's a Colombian reggaeton singer. He's one of the biggest in the world. And what's cool is he actually like crosses not just like with Latinos, but he, you know, he's across hip hop. He's across multiple cultures. He's, you know, performed with Beyonce, with J-Lo. So he's a huge deal. And, you know, we kicked off a partnership with him in August, and it's a full year partnership where the entire campaign, his real name is Jose, and so J Balvin, but his real name is Jose. So when Jose is with his friends drinking Miller Lite, it's Jose time. So it's our play on Miller time. And we had a whole campaign that we've launched. We actually launched it at a bodega in New York City, where he was there, and we surprised and delighted consumers with him there. When they would go and pick up a Miller Lite, he was at the cash register. And so it was just a really fun way to kick it off. And we've got lots of great things happening with J Balvin. So that was a big bet for us. Our visual identity around the program, he's this like bright and colorful artist. We have used those colors and we've integrated them with our Miller Lite visual identity. So again, that's where the images I wanted to show, but it's easily looked up on our website. We're really proud of that work too. And we think it's going to go a long way. And this was something where as a brand, we've been very cautious about celebrity partnerships because authenticity is something that's so important to us. So we wanted to make sure that whatever partner we chose felt really authentic for us, and we launched it in an authentic way. And I feel like with this J Balvin program, we've done that.
Yeah, I think it's so important, especially in your categories, being authentic, being playful, having fun with consumers. I mean, that's what it's all about. So I think we're pretty much at time. Just seeing if there were any other questions or comments. I don't see any. But I guess, like, you know, generally speaking, kind of my last question takeaway is as you kind of look to the future, look to next year, hopefully more of a normalized year. What are you most excited about, specifically, you know, at Molson Coors? Like, what are you excited about? What do you see as kind of being a long-term sort of trend that based on what's happened the last couple of years?
For sure. So, I mean, I would bucket into a couple of things. I think first, I'm excited that I think that in the last year and a half, just like people's awareness and just like importance around DEI and just inclusivity, it's not only made an importance to our brands, but to our team. And I see it in terms of who we're hiring, how we're working, how we're thinking about these things. And I actually, you know, I really believe it's not because we're an organization that just wants to do good. I actually think like diversity is good for business, because when you have diverse people on your team, people think differently and it helps to bring different initiatives to life. So I'm excited for that to continue. I'm excited for bars to continue to reopen so that people will go out and drink our beer. And then, and I'm excited for things like, you know, partnerships and making momentum on programs like I talked about with the LGBTQ plus community, with our J Balvin work. We've got so much exciting stuff ahead.
That's great. Well, thanks so much, Sophia. And I see Maggie back on the screen, so I believe our time is up.
It is, but man, what a great conversation. Thank you both so much. Sophia, I feel like we need an hour, you and I, just to talk about all of the commonalities. I was because obviously Giancola, fellow Italian myself, the Peroni hits home for me too, which is hysterical and so great. I also was laughing because I just want to power through these last 2 months of my pregnancy so I can enjoy all of these adult beverages responsibly, of course. So, but the reason why I felt so compelled, because even your articulation of all of the incredible examples of what you've been up to in the recent past and how you're driving consumer engagement were just fantastic. I loved the New Balance example. I mean, just so many good tidbits in there, so much creativity, just tremendous.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun, and you can tell I love my job. I'm very lucky to have it.
Yeah, I mean, the passion is palpable and I appreciate it very much. So thank you. Thank you for joining us and for all of those great examples. I'm sure everybody is a little bummed we didn't get to see all of the visual aids, but
yeah, that's me. I'm creative, but my tech skills are not 100%. So.
I can be right there with you on that, but it's a great plug to drive some increased web traffic. I'm sure we'll see over the next few days as people want to go check it all out. So in all seriousness, thank you. It was terrific. And Kevin, awesome job helping navigate the conversation. So thank you both for the time and the engagement.
Thanks so much.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye. All right, everyone. We have one final session, and it is last, but it's certainly not least, because this is going to be an awesome fireside chat with Amy D'Souza, Senior Director, Media and Digital Marketing at Constellation Brands, who will be joined by our expert moderator, Laura Lembeck, one of our VPs of CPG here at Veracast. So we will get them up and running and round out what will be our last session of this awesome day. And then I will close us out right after their session with a few remarks and some reminders. So please stay tuned for just a few extra minutes at the close of this. But in the meantime, thank you, Laura, Amy, for joining us.
Happy to be here. So glad to be here. I got to listen to Sophia's presentation. You guys are rounding out the day with the beverage alcohol category, and I saw she had a shirt, so I decided I would. You can't see it in the virtual screen, but I have a Corona Seltzer in hand. It's
so Amy, I love it. You're bringing fire to this last session. That's amazing. Well, I'll let you two take it from here, and excited to hear what you have to share.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maggie. And great to see you today, Amy. Thank you so much for your participation. And I'm incredibly excited to kick off this conversation with you.
Yeah, glad to round out the end of the day. It's hard to beat Sophia's examples. She had some great ones to share. So I hope that we have some, I hope my visuals work today, because I think that will help with some of the excitement.
Absolutely. And I think it was a very strategic move by Brand Innovators to put you both back last as we start to think about the end of the day creeping up. I love that you've got a seltzer on hand. So we're certainly working towards happy hour on my end as well. Well, awesome. I think, Amy, if you want to just give a bit of a background of your role over at Constellation Brands, I think that would be a really nice segue for us to get our fireside chat started for the next 35 minutes here.
Great. Yeah. So yes, you guys did the introduction. Amy D'Souza. I lead the media and digital marketing practice at Constellation Brands. My team oversees paid, owned, and earned media across the organization, working across beer, wine, and spirits brands. So some of our favorites: Corona, Modelo, Pacifico. On the wine side, Meiomi and Kim Crawford are some of the favorites, and then Svedka is one of our spirits brands. So excited to be here, and love working at Constellation in the bev alc industry. It's fun and exciting.
Absolutely. And such an incredible breadth of portfolio that you guys offer across the categories as well as brands. And I know we had the pleasure of sharing some of our trade secrets. You mentioned two of my personal favorites in the wine category. So Meiomi and Kim Crawford, certainly staples within my wine fridge and cabinet overall. So as we get into the holiday season, and I know we'll touch on that, I think there's a lot of those being served amongst families and friends as we gather. And we're excited to do that in a little bit of a safer environment this year versus last as well.
Yeah, hopefully we'll all be able to celebrate with lots of wine, beer, and spirits in person this year.
Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing a bit about your background and the role that you play. I think it's such a unique one in terms of the connectivity and the breadth of categories that you touch. So I kind of wanted to dig in there, especially as we think about how has the last 18 months really changed how you and your teams partner with your brand teams as well as your agencies of record to think about your year-long strategies and maybe some of those that maybe you have to be a little bit more nimble given what we've learned most recently.
Yeah, well, I'm sure others have talked about this today, but I think the key word of 2020 for advertisers and marketers is agility. And we certainly, like other brands and companies, had to make a lot of quick pivots in our plans and had to change a lot of things about the way we did business to be able to adapt in a much quicker fashion. And so as we've moved through 2020 and 2021, that has sort of become more of the new normal, and being able to, condense our planning timelines, to be able to react in a little bit more real time, and to be able to be more culturally relevant. So, but the reality is that, not everything can be planned, in short timeframes. We still are a pretty big TV advertiser, and the upfront marketplace, for one, is an annual planning cycle. So, as we've moved into 2022, we've kind of looked at our planning approach in three pillars. The first is what I would say is more of the annual planning timeline, which is, our always on pillar, evergreen content, more brand building, brand equity. And that's where, linear TV plays a role, where we have to plan that, a year in advance. And then the second pillar is really more time-based programs. Those are more digital in nature, thematic programs related to key holidays, Cinco de Mayo, summer grilling season. We just came from Dia de los Muertos, would be another example of that. And we're condensing those planning timelines to be a little bit more relevant, where we plan that, weeks and months in advance versus annually. And then our third pillar is really, we reserve dollars for what I'll call in the moment messaging, to be able to react to things in more real time. And I will say that we're on a journey with our brands. Not all of our brands have the funds nor the resources to really be able to plan that ahead of time. But a brand like Corona, for example, one of our main objectives is to drive cultural relevance. And driving cultural relevance, you can't always plan that ahead of time. And
Absolutely.
so, we've been able to thankfully reserve some dollars and keep those dollars to be able to react in real time. And the most recent example I wanted to share, if technology is on our side, I want to share a quick example of a program that we ran in September, where Corona was able to react to some news around some people in the Philadelphia area who were stealing a Corona Snoop Dogg bobblehead.
Oh my gosh.
You can't make that stuff up, but we were able to react to that in real time. So I'm going to see if I can share. It's not a video, it's just a really quick screen grab. So let's see if I can make this work.
Oh, awesome. It looks like it's coming up on my end.
All right. I don't know if you guys are seeing presenter mode, but is this, Laura, I'm going to rely on you. Is this working?
It looks like it's just a little bit maybe expanded out, but we can see a majority of the screen grab. So if you just...
I'm in presenter mode, so let's see if we can do this a little bit. I don't want to spend too much time working on this, but yes.
Yep.
All right. So I won't read through all of this, but, again, there were news stories popping up where people were stealing these 3-foot tall bobbleheads to Corona branded items. So I heard Sophia saying that people love their branded merchandise from Miller. The same goes for Corona. Everybody loves their branded merch. And then when you have a brand ambassador like Snoop, you put those two together, and I guess it's too much to handle for some people, or they're out trying to steal these from the grocery stores. So we had a cross-functional team come quickly together to create this mini campaign to ride the news wave and to make sure that we were engaging in this topic in, of course, a brand safe and positive way. And so what we did is we developed this very down and dirty quick post. We tagged Snoop in it. And of course, he was all about it, and he was able to tweet it out as well. And it got picked up. It got picked up on the news. We saw some late night parodies of it and stuff. And, there's an example of Complex here. And, these are the things that you just, you can really take advantage of if you're able to act quickly in the moment. So you'll see here, generated over 2 billion media impressions. Some of this was, just the news itself, but some of this was thanks to Corona and the Snoop post as well. And so, yeah, this is just a really fun example of us actually being able to act in real time.
Absolutely. I mean, what an awesome thing for somebody to have for their home bar, although we don't want to encourage stealing, but I think there's certainly some desires, right, for people to get some really awesome branded content when it's out there in the marketplace. And so awesome for you guys to be able to be so nimble and take advantage of that. I think that's really speaks to the credibility of the way the marketplace has changed, as well as the sophistication of consumers. So certainly a really awesome story there. And do you have any reason as to understanding why it was just the Philadelphia market, or did you guys purposely ship more to that market? Was there a reason that occurred?
No, it was the news that picked it up, right? It was one grocery store, and it's an odd story, so the news picked it up. We saw it in the news and we took advantage of it. So it just happened to be in the Philly market. Nothing crazy about Philadelphia that is any different than any other market for Corona.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I always think it's wonderful to see the visualizations come to life.
I think so. You've talked about the three kind of pillars that you've gone through. How do you look when you're going across all three of those planning pillars? Consumer insights, right? The amount of research we have at our fingertip is incredibly vast at this point. I think we all also took a pause when the pandemic truly started of how do we understand what consumers are truly looking for in this new navigation space that they're going after? How have you guys at Constellation leaned into consumers' insights across those three buckets, but also then following those through into activation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say there's, we leverage consumer insights from all the way from planning to activation to measurement and optimization. And so if I look at our, our planning cycle, I would start with we're leveraging consumer insights to drive decisions on, our overall media strategy as well as our channel allocations. So we have an amazing consumer insights group that, gives us information on, who our core consumer is, as well as our growth consumer segments. And they develop these annual insights guides that the entire marketing department has the ability to access. And so we start with that. And then we work with our media agency to ensure that we really understand at a deeper level their media attitudes and their behaviors. And all of that is sort of at the center of our annual media plans. That's the most important thing, is tying, media consumer habits to our brand vision and our brand objectives. So then as we move into tactical planning and executions, that's when we can layer on a lot of that behavioral data, right? We have so much behavioral data at our fingertips from our first party data, second party data, and third party data. So we layer that on top of all that information that we already know about the consumer, and then we can really activate that in digital. And I would say that's really important, especially in our programmatic buys. We really are buying on an audience and we're not necessarily buying in content. So then as we move into measurement and optimizations, then we activate all of these different audiences, and then we're looking at the metrics, right? We're assigning KPIs based on the goals and the objectives that we're measuring against, and then we're optimizing that throughout the campaign. And I would say the most important piece of that is it doesn't end there, right? Because our consumer insights team, they're sort of the owners of the consumer. So we pass that information on to our consumer insights team, and we just gain more and more information about our consumers as time goes on. So I think it's a really important cycle, right? We're always learning. Consumers aren't static, and we're always looking at sort of all the information that's at our fingertips, from traditional research, qualitative research, to being able to access more information via behavioral data, and being able to analyze that to be able to drive relevance over time, and to stay on top of the consumer attitudes and behaviors.
Absolutely. And I know Maggie kind of tied this up in the beginning of how we're thinking about like the acceleration of the future of CPG marketing. And here at Veracast, you've hit a lot of the pillars that we focus on too, right? Leading with insights, understanding where our brands and partners want to go and how we can then activate and measure and follow it through. Because if you're not, you're missing a really big opportunity to complete that funnel, right? So the opportunity to then continue to learn on consumers overall. And within your different buckets of categories that you guys play in, how does reactivation of learnings look different within wine versus spirits versus beer? Are there any unique insights that you guys have learned by different categories overall? And what does that look like?
Yeah, the categories are vastly different, surprisingly, they're beverage alcohol, but, I'll just take beer, for example. Beer is a branded category. There's a lot of brands that people love and know, and that has been built over, 30 plus years, right? But in the wine category, you look at brand awareness, and almost every single brand has very low brand awareness because people don't shop by brand, they shop by varietal, they shop by type. And so building brand awareness in a wine segment looks very different, right? So we're really definitely focused more on top of the funnel for a lot of our wine brands, where brands like Corona and Modelo can really play in that mid and lower funnel. So it's not an either or. We're looking across the full funnel across our activations, but it's really where we place the emphasis. And consumer insights really drive that, right? Understanding, where a consumer is, what they know about the brand, what do they know about the category, really drives those decisions on channel investments and where we place our emphasis in the purchase journey.
Absolutely. I think that's so important too. And I think to build on that, like the purchase journey and the fragmentation of the marketplace and the preferences of consumers changing, especially within these categories, right? We were figuring out, how do we stay at home and with the bars closed, what does that mean for us? How are we going to get our wine, beer, and spirits into our home? So how has it affected of where you guys are really focused on engaging with consumers, and how is that driven your strategy and activation with the changing in the marketplace overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one main thing that we're really focused on with this fragmentation. I know, if anybody's reading eMarketer all the time like I am, you see that media consumption overall, time spent with media is increasing, but the time spent per channel and this time spent per partner is actually decreasing. And we see that predominantly in linear TV, where we see, yes, linear TV still provides the largest reach of any single channel, but that reach is declining over time. So what that means for us is that we need a much deeper channel mix and a channel set to drive reach and frequency to drive our business and our volume goals. And so that just makes it more complex, right? You have different creative best practices and you have to stitch together measurement across more channels than ever. And so that's where we rely on our agency, and we rely on sort of an omni-channel view of things and not look at everything in silos. It's really the sum of all the parts that work together. And with that, as media consumption shifts and are changing, we really mirror that behavior, right? So we're putting more emphasis and more investment in digital channels. Over the past couple of years, an increased investment in social channels, as well as streaming, OTT, and CTV. I mean, that was all the talk at the beginning of COVID, right? There was an initial bump in linear television, and then it was all of the streaming services and a lot of that binge watching. And so you've seen a proliferation of opportunities from suppliers in that space. And so it's really just about being in all the places that consumers are consuming content. And it is certainly becoming more complex as time goes on.
Absolutely. But I think the complexity also speaks to our ability as consumers to kind of make those decisions, right? And there's a little bit of a power shift back into the consumers of owning their day and owning their own purchase journey. And then as marketers, it's how are we navigating that to marry it up to getting them down further along the funnel from a purchase perspective. I also am guilty of getting many streaming services early in COVID and still carrying those through because, it's nice to be able to continue binge watching over time. So I'm guilty of that for sure. But as you're thinking about the changing dynamics, and you've mentioned that you've really focused on moving people through the purchase journey, right? Where there's a little bit of awareness that always needs to happen on the front end, especially as you mentioned in terms of wine based on varietal shopping versus brand shopping. How do you guys really focus on pushing the consumer towards that final purchase step? I think e-com has become a really big focus for all. So are you guys playing in that space? What does that look like for Constellation overall?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've definitely placed an increased emphasis in performance marketing. We have a dedicated e-commerce team, thankfully, that was built up prior to COVID because the acceleration of e-commerce in our category just took off during COVID, right? And it's not stopping. Once people realized they could purchase alcohol online, it's like, no, this is now a behavior, right? If I can avoid going to the grocery store, I will, right?
Absolutely.
So I think one of the most interesting things that we've been able to do is sort of navigating the legal landscape when it comes to being able to drive an e-com message or even a purchase message overall. And this is where technology really comes into play. Technology has really allowed us to be a lot more efficient in our compliance strategies when it comes to purchasing our products. So for people who may not be aware, there are different regulations state by state on what beverage alcohol advertisers can say and communicate in an ad message. So just for an example, in Florida, in an ad message, you can communicate to unaffiliated retailers in an ad message. In a state like California, you can't mention a retailer at all. So we leverage, dynamic creative optimization, both in our ads as well as our website, to be able to deliver a compliant message and also a relevant message. So in places like California, where we can't actually communicate a retail location, we'll drive people to a product locator, and then they can initiate their own behaviors and be able to find out where they can purchase a product. And then, you know, in places where we can communicate that, we really try to drive people through the funnel. And I will say, you know, we take this, what we call a hybrid approach in almost all of our activations, where we have a strong call to action in all of our ad messages to drive to purchase, even if it's an awareness tactic, right? So we're always driving to the product locator. We're always trying to drive that strong call to action to really just push people through their purchase journey. And even if it's a secondary objective.
Absolutely. And I think that makes a ton of sense, especially as you guys are so focused on consumer insights. We know you're reaching the right consumer at the right time. You're moving them as far as you can, given some category restrictions, to really get them to make that final sale. I also think I've been lucky enough to be in states where you can get it delivered directly to your door. So I think that is ultimately the dream goal for a lot of marketers, right? Of just that one click and then having the product show up to the consumer, because you know they're so engaged based on all of the research and planning that you've done. As you think about where you guys are continuing to invest within the e-com and the digital space, obviously technology has been it's super relevant and super exciting for the changes that you've seen. Do you see that trend continuing across all categories? Are there certain brands or categories where you feel like there are still a big focus outside of that space?
I mean, I will say that the beverage alcohol category is still in a bit of an infancy stage, especially compared to other categories when it comes to e-commerce. So we're always going to have to navigate, you know, the 3-tier system, right? We don't, you know, we sell through distributors. So it's important for us to always be kind of on the lookout for compliance efforts. But we're really doubling down on this. You know, like I said, we follow consumer behavior. And as long as consumers are continuing to want to purchase alcohol online, you know, it's our vision to be the #1 total beverage alcohol supplier in the e-com space. And so we're placing a lot of emphasis as an organization in that area. And even though it's a small piece of the pie today, it is going to be a larger piece of the pie over time. And I know Sophia talked about first party data, right? Being able to have access to this data versus, you know, just directly through the retailers is really important for us too.
Absolutely. Well, I do want to take a little bit of a pivot. We've obviously crossed the threshold into November here, which, to be honest, I'm having a really tough time wrapping my head around the fact that I need to do my holiday shopping and I'm going to see some of my family for the first time in a really long time for Thanksgiving. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you're thinking. I know you've got a lot of different opportunities within the holiday season, but I know there's a lot of curiosity as Corona always shows up as a brand around that time. So would love to hear what you guys are thinking for some staples going into the holiday planning season.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to our first question around tentpole moments, we are still in the planning phase this year for our holiday programs, but I thought it would be fun to share a couple of examples from last year. So I will say during this time of year, it's one of my favorite times of year to work on Corona. And while I can't take credit for the O Tannenbaum spot that has been running in television for over 30 years, one of the things that as a marketing department we need to do is make sure that our brand continues to stay relevant while still, you know, taking advantage of the iconic O Tannenbaum spot. So I'm going to share an example really quick of a campaign that we ran last year, how we leveraged the sweepstakes to drive engagement, relevance, and keep Corona top of mind. So it worked last time. So let's hope it works this time. Okay.
Awesome. And I think if you just drag down the notes section for some reason,
here we go.
Up on our side. There we go.
All right. Is it in screen?
And I think it's pretty large. If you just drag over like on the left-hand side of the screen where just make maybe the preview a little bit smaller, we can then see the full screen.
Okay. I can try to do full screen. I don't know if this works. Yes, no.
I think we're good there.
Okay.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. So yes, this is the campaign that we ran last year. And, you know, the insight really here from last year is that obviously people weren't celebrating as much in person, limited in-person gatherings. People, you know, wanted to celebrate the holidays a little bit earlier than normal because there just wasn't a lot of stuff to look forward to. And, you know, Corona has always been known for this, you know, iconic Felice campaign that transcends time and occasions and really has this sense of positivity. But we wanted to just really surprise and delight consumers a little bit more. And so we engaged with Thrillist and Pop Sugar to host 30 days of giveaway sweepstakes. You know, hosted merchandise on the Corona store directly on these websites where people could buy branded holiday items And we also leveraged some content from some of our brand ambassadors that actually ran as content on Thrillist, where they were actually showing some of their favorite things, and of course embedding Corona into that content directly, right? So some of our favorite ambassadors that were featured, Ricky Fowler, Snoop, of course, Bad Bunny, and Tony Romo, to name a few. And while this seems like a pretty straightforward sweepstakes, we saw some amazing results. So it goes to show that you don't have to be super complex or complicated to drive relevance. Like I said earlier, people love their Corona merchandise, especially those ugly sweaters. So if you want, go on to coronamerch.com and find that before your holiday parties this year, because hopefully they'll be in person. But you'll see some of these results here. I mean, incredible lifts in unaided brand awareness, message association, and our brand relevance measure appeals to me. And then people were spending a ton of time on this ambassador content too. So just some great examples of how Corona can stay relevant while still running a TV spot that's been on air for over 30 years.
That's incredible. I mean, I know that's a lot of work by the teams to really think about, okay, last year was such a success. How do you think and change, but also maintain to continue to trend upward on that opportunity and really take advantage and win in that season, like you said, based on your temples and timing events. So, and I might have to go on and search Corona merch myself. My mother-in-law is a huge sweater person, and her birthday is in December. So that might be coming her way for a gift.
Oh, perfect. There's a lot of holiday gear that I'm sure is going to be up if it isn't already up on the website.
Awesome. And I think you wanted to share potentially one that wasn't Corona related.
Yes, I know. We've shared a couple of Corona examples. I had to share my favorite holiday example from last year. And this is from our Svedka brand. So this was a fun one. We actually pulled this off in less than a month. The organization gifted Svedka some money to drive relevance around the holiday season, around this time last year. And the team pulled off this amazing program with what we're calling grandfluencers. So the Svedka target, we're calling them a party starter, definitely very like Gen Z, millennial, people who are just find a party moment no matter what it is, right? In those everyday moments. And so, this target in particular, we saw, an increase in interest around these grandfluencers, where we saw some increased following and, knowing that people were going to celebrate virtually and they weren't going to see their own grandmas. There was sort of this fun little insight about like, how can we bring like the fun, spirit of Svedka into the social space via these grandma campaigns. So, hired some influencers, if you will, grandfluencers, as we coined them, to develop some content for us. So this was done 100% in social. We did some long form and short form videos, and we did some stills and news feeds. And then we also wanted to make sure we included some community management because we anticipated a lot of consumer engagement and commentary. I don't have the video, unfortunately, but if you go and search Batty Winkle, she did this fun rap. This little VO right here was done in a rap voice. So I'm not going to pretend to do that here, but it's super fun and exciting. And of course, the results here are great too. We had some great reach, some lifts in ad recall and purchase intent. And what the leaders in our organization always like to see is increased ROI. So this was a contributing factor to some increased ROIs versus the year prior.
That's awesome. One, I think it's just such an incredible thing that we've got grandfluencers out there in the marketplace who can drive such incredible engagement. And obviously, I think ROI and ROIS has become king in this space, and it will continue to lead that overall. So I think there's really great opportunity here. And I don't know if I can even get my grandma to open or use her iPhone. So the fact that there are grandfluencers out there, they're really leaning into this space. And I certainly know that I'll do a little bit of homework with the Batty Winkle after this as well.
There you go. She's a real person outside of Svedka too. So if you just follow her, it's some fun content that she puts out there.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I think we've got about 9 minutes left. So I'm going to switch over to some Q&A, and I've got the chat open here. So I'll ask this one. Is Constellation Brands activating media around purpose, social justice, DEI initiatives?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something that's an area that we're focusing more on as an organization. I will say, we leave it up to each of the individual brand marketing teams to do what's really authentic to them. And so, we have different initiatives in the space where, there's definitely some LGBTQ efforts going on with Corona, and that has been for years, I will say. And, we definitely have, some social justice campaigns going on for each of the individual brands. But I think the most important thing is to not just jump on the bandwagon and do it in a way that's authentic for the brand. It doesn't come off as just a me too.
Absolutely. And I think there's consumers can recognize that. So the more authentic that you show up, the more they will as well and continue to engage with the brand overall, which is incredibly important for longevity and commitment to loyalty overall. Another question for you, as you think about the holiday, what are you guys anticipating this year versus last year? Anything that you feel like you've left aside in opportunistic funds or like temples that you've changed versus last year's?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some good examples in terms of some of the changes. I mean, I think the big thing is that we're anticipating more in-person get-togethers, right? And, a lot more activity at bars and restaurants. So you'll see a lot more event activations from us, taking advantage of that and anticipating, more in-person gatherings. We definitely steered away from that last year. We didn't want to even really feature people and scenes at bars and restaurants very much. So I will say that is probably the biggest thing that we're focused on in terms of both creative as well as our overall tentpole programs, being able to feature social gatherings a little bit more overtly than we have in the past.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to that as well, right? So two other questions that I just want to run through. Are there specific areas of digital transformation that you're focused on now?
Yes, that is a very timely topic. We actually have an entire team dedicated to digital transformation. I think the biggest thing that we're really focused on right now as an organization is the deprecation of cookies and really being able to figure out and future-proof our organization for that time. And so there's been a lot of focus on first-party data. I will say there's been a lot more focus on our websites. I would say in our category websites, some brands have been more active than others, but definitely a lot more emphasis on placing content, relevant content on our websites and being able to make sure that, of course, everything that we're doing is legally compliant and that we're making sure that, we're getting people to opt in to our messaging. And I think as we have more first party data over time, it really unlocks a lot more opportunities in the loyalty and advocacy space. We haven't really been playing in that space as much as a lot of other brands. And I think there's some great opportunities that get uncovered, right? We're doing it for a reason about first party or about cookie deprecation, but we're also going to, hopefully get a lot smarter about our consumers and being able to stitch together a lot of information to really paint a picture and drive relevant messaging.
Absolutely. I think the cookie-less environment overall has been really important for partners and manufacturers to think about, and making sure that you've got stability of consumers as we move to a cookie-less world, which has certainly been a priority and a focus for Veracast as well. So it's nice to see we're going down the same path as the industry and partners. There's another question here I wanted to get to. So do you get KPIs on viral ads of the ad before, or viral elements of the ad before the campaign, to estimate its resonance, virality, and reach?
So do we have benchmarks ahead of time is what I'm hearing about viral campaigns. I mean, I think that the beauty of a viral campaign is that, you're hoping that it takes off. We certainly do have some benchmarks, right? We've been doing these types of campaigns for several years, and we leverage, other companies and, like Millward Brown or Servata, they have, some types of benchmarks. But I would say, a lot of times the KPIs for these types of programs are less about trying to drive a certain number of impressions and is really more about trying to drive brand relevance. And so that's what I think we're mostly focused on. And if something becomes viral and turns into a sensation, that's amazing. But those things are a little bit hard to plan for in terms of number of impressions.
Absolutely. I feel like you never know what truly is going to be the right time and the right moment, and you have to be able to capitalize once it does take off. So
but if somebody does, I would love to see what the recipe is for success.
The secret sauce. I think there's a few other questions popping in. So I think we've got 4 minutes. So I'm going to keep running through them if that works for you, Amy. Will you see beer brands expanding into esports or other non-traditional sports sponsorships? Can you identify areas of interest beyond major sports?
Yeah, we're actually, some of our brands are already playing in the space here. We have, we've dabbled in esports here and there. It's one of those areas, as a beverage alcohol company, we have to be a little bit careful about, the 21 plus audience or compliance. But in areas that, we that are compliant, we are advertising. We have brands like Pacifico, which is zeroed in on the Gen Z consumer, and we advertise in places like Twitch. We've run some influencer programs, again, through more of our PR team and our lifestyle and experiential team. So we definitely dabble in that space. And then in terms of other non-traditional sports, Pacifico is another one where we've been a longstanding sponsor of the X Games. So that is action sports are a real big focus area, snowboarding, X Games, action sports, skateboarding, that kind of thing. So yeah, they're definitely, we run the gamut of sports in our industry, in our company.
That's awesome. And I think that, we always continue at the Olympics being an area where I just continue to impress of how many new sports are popping up. I feel like from a major sports perspective, I've got a good handling, but there are so many activities out there and that have really taken a hold and continue to be a really awesome lifestyle change for a lot of individuals. So the fact that you guys are leaning into those areas just speaks to your desire to be relevant across multiple different consumer bases and in their communities and in their daily lives.
Yeah, it's all about, trying to find that right brand fit, what makes sense, based on the consumer segment you're trying to, try to resonate with, and what, is a strong connection with the brand voice that you have out there. And so, I'm lucky to have a number of brands across beer, wine, and spirits that, we find a fit across, a lot of different, content pillars in sports specifically.
Awesome. I'm going to keep going here because we've got a few that are still coming in. So what trends are you seeing in the beverage category that are new and emerging? I think we've talked a little bit about seltzer between your opener and the last one. Are there new flavors or new additives? What does that look like as you think about the future of your categories?
Yeah, I think Sophia talked a little bit about it too. Seltzers are still all the rage, and you still see the industry, launching new seltzer brands all the time. And we're certainly part of that. I will say in the seltzer space, it seems to be all about flavor variety. So, being able to, continue running the fan favorites, if you will, for flavors, but having that, those varietals and the continual switching of seltzer products. And, we look at it, too, right? Seltzers have sort of focused more on this, low calorie sessionability, but we're starting to see things in the marketplace that kind of run the gamut a little bit more flavorful. Some products that have a little bit more calories in them, a little bit more flavorful. So I anticipate seeing some more variety within that seltzer space, right? It's that sort of that flavor-based profile, and then expanding into, some additional options from a flavor standpoint and from a product type standpoint.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of trying all the different flavors and even doing some taste testing myself because I feel like there are a lot of surprise and delight opportunities out there that you never really know what's going to land across all of your categories. So I know not many consumers are maybe like me, but trying things out and then deciding what is right for me personally from a taste perspective has always been fun. And then I'll ask you this, Amy, what are you most excited about in your upcoming holiday season for your brands? What do you think is going to be, where does your excitement lie as you think about the next few months as you close out the year?
Yeah, so our fiscal ends in March, so we're still a few months away from the close of our fiscal. But I think as things start opening up, being able to activate more events and being able to do things more in person, personally, but also through our brands, right? Our category is such a social category, right? It's about getting together with friends and family and celebrating. And, we've done some awesome creative things over the past 18 months without having, a lot of those in-person gatherings. But I think we just look forward to being able to do more of that, right? It won't be, what it was before. We're going to probably have some virtual version of in-person events moving forward, right? We've found how to do things virtually, but being able to get back and, EDM festivals that Corona is doing and, being able to, get together for those UFC fights for Modelo and being able to, see consumers like truly enjoy our products and social gatherings and celebrations is definitely something I look forward to.
Absolutely. I do too. And I think I can't thank you enough for sharing some of those examples. I think the Snoop Dogg one continues to just scream out at me. It's such an awesome capitalization of relevancy in the social experience and really using those opportunistic funds and reacting in real time, which is something I think will continue to be really important as we talk about the future of CPG marketing, the real time reaction and overall. And I certainly know that I need to go follow Batty White to figure out what she's up to on the Grandfluencer space.
That's where I was going to go. I liked the Snoop example, but the Grandfluencers, I can't. That's amazing. Yes. Definitely one of the highlights.
Yeah, creative minds all coming together in a very short time frame, trying to figure out how to drive relevance. And there you go. You come up with an amazing Grandfluencer campaign.
I think it's amazing. I think it's such a fun play on words, such a fun concept, and so catchy and creative. Especially, I mean, talk about like the ultimate Grandfluencer, Betty White, right? I mean, there's such a cultural component to that. It's awesome. I love it. I love it. No, thank you so much, Amy, for joining us, and Laura for navigating some awesome questions and some awesome thought-provoking ideas and concepts for Amy to draw upon her experiences. It was such a great session. I think, Amy, so many great examples. Appreciate the visuals. Loved, I mean, a theme we've heard throughout the day, not only the agility piece, like you mentioned, but also this importance of first-party data, this connectivity with consumers, and then all of the systemic impacts from that, right? So not only the ability to create this meaningful relationship, because that's what consumers want, but then to start to diversify our business models even. I think about your categories, your brands, and how being able to ship those as gifts over the course of the last year. I mean, that was such an important way for me to stay connected with my friend. And there's just so many different elements to it that are awesome. And I thought your examples were incredibly spot on, really inspiring. And I thank you for sharing all of that with us.
Well, I enjoyed speaking today. Thank you so much for having me. And
absolutely. And I need you and Sophia both to promise me in 2 months when this pregnancy is over, you guys will join me for a happy hour, because you're really it's really hitting home right now. I want a glass of Meiomi so badly.
Oh my gosh. Well, third trimester, no one will judge you.
Yeah, I know. That's true. That's true. Well, thank you both so much. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the thoughtfulness. And again, just thank you both so much. I will talk to you later. I am going to go ahead and round things out. I want to thank everyone that's still on the line with us today for being here. I know you could be anywhere, and maybe you are, but you're here with us watching what was a long but super thoughtful and collaborative discussion. A huge thank you to all of our speakers and our moderators. A massive thank you to Brand Innovators for making this event possible. Your partnership is one we do not take for granted, and we feel so fortunate to have. It was an awesome day of talking about how we connect with consumers from an engagement perspective, from an innovation perspective, from a D2C perspective, like we heard from Jordan. So much great insight and content. I hope everybody feels as inspired as I do, feels that they have action things they can go take away and implement in their own marketing worlds, as well as their own personal worlds. So thank you so much for being a part of the dialogue. Please be sure to check out Brand Innovator website to see what else is in store for next week. And then I would also invite everyone to please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Maggie Giancola, or any of my colleagues or speakers you heard from today, so we can keep this very important dialogue around the future of CPG marketing going amongst all of us as industry participants and leaders. Thank you again, and be well.